and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, Larry could not be with us this evening, so I'm filling in for him.
Roll call.
Yeah, so roll call.
Basting? Bush? Oh, okay. Bush?
Here.
Dolphin?
Yes.
Gudmore? Here. Hay?
Here.
Steffes? Stevenson? Here.
The superintendent's report.
All right, we'll start with the superintendent's report.
So, as we walk through just some of the things that have been happening this week with our district, there is a group of us that presented at the Wisconsin Association of School District Administrators Conference on the use of social media. So you'll see some of my friends in this picture from left to right. You have Chippewa Falls, Howard Suwamico, Elk Mound, and myself are here. The fourth school is, what's the fourth one? Do you remember, Joelle?
Waterloo?
Thank you, Waterloo Superintendent. The second from the left on the top there, Damien LaCroix was the Superintendent of the Year last year. And it's a great group of people to present with. And these are all school districts that are doing really amazing things around social media. And we were selected by Andrea in the bottom left-hand corner to be part of the group that tells our story about what's happening in Mineral Point and giving some of our tips and suggestions for starting a social media presence in your school district and other area schools around the state. We have two long-term subs that are with us. Evie Tooley is up above in art, and down below is Trent Sullivan in PE. They're both doing a great job filling in for some long-term needs, and just really happy to have them on board, and I think they're really thriving and enjoying their position here. They're doing a nice job. Zippy Zero has made his presence. Some know Zippy and I have a relationship. He's my brother. And Zippy comes to school every 10th day of school because it ends in a 0, and he counts up with the kids from 10, and now the kids are up to 20, and they're working all the way up to 30. So Zippy flies in, counts with the kids up to the number that ends with a 0, and then flies back out again. So keep watching for Zippy. He is in and about our buildings. We are currently offering calculus through the Wisconsin Technology Institute Consortium. And this is kind of a panoramic view. Obviously, this is our collaboration room, but Ben McWilliams is on the right-hand side in the blue, the smart board, and on the left side is TJ Cooley, which is Kevin Cooley's son, who attends in Highland. And he is taking a calculus class in the back of the room. He's just like another kid in the classroom, and they're all interacting with one another. So that's been working out really well so far, and Ben has really taken on that position well. Students of the Month were presented at the last Kiwanis meeting. You have Hans Miller and Brady Roberts were selected for this month. The JDO Foundation at the elementary school, again, that was a grant that was awarding laptops, more specifically Chromebooks to the 5th grade class. And in response to that gift, they then collaborate with students across the Atlantic Ocean and are pairing with schools in England and having conversations across the globe. The homecoming finds Amanda Murphy as named our new queen. It was an exciting week all the way through from the day-to-day events leading up to the culmination of the parade and the pep assembly and the homecoming football game and dance. So just a great week of activities, and all of us are now breathing a sigh of relief as we can get back to some normalcy. The band sported their new band uniforms. They looked really sharp out on the field, and you'll have a request before you tonight to complete that order, but this gives you a sample of what the band has done. Their old uniforms were 20 to 30 years old, I think, pretty outdated, and it was hard to find select sizing. This is National Principals of the Month, and so I want to just recognize our principals, some of which are here. Matt Renwick, Vicki Dahl, and I don't know if Mitch is in yet or not, but he is going to be joining us. Just thank you to our principals and in the recognition for their leadership in their buildings. Matt Renwick recently presented at the ASCD conference, and that is the Supervision and Curriculum Development Conference that was up in the Dells. So it's always great to give back and present some of the information that we've learned along the way and share it with other schools across the state. We had our FFA Sectional Leadership Conference recently. Morgan Fitzsimons is our state FFA Vice President, and because of that, Mineral Point was fortunate to host the Sectional Leadership Conference or Summit, where we had over 200 FFA members coming into our school and enjoying our space and area leadership conference. Books on the Bus is a new program that was started up at the elementary. This was a result of a Land's End donation where they donated backpacks, and then with the books involved. Matt, you want to speak a little bit more about what's happening there?
Sure. We got, I think, 6 backpacks donated from Land's End. We've had other backpacks just for kids who don't have them. These ones were pretty heavy duty. So our Kimberly and Rachel, our 2 reading interventionists, said, hey, what if we have all these extra books from the book room, what if we put the books in the backpacks and put them on the bus? And that's what they did. And so the bus drivers were a little nervous, I think, at first of how to manage that, but the kids have, sounds like they've handled it well, and it's just kind of extending the school beyond school and give them something to do on the bus ride.
Yeah, great idea. There's also cross-box donation. You'll see there's a box now on the street where you can grab an orange filet and cross the street, and that was in donation by Wayne's Automotive, so I want to thank them for their partnership to create some safe walkways for students. There is now a GoFundMe page set up in effort to name the new stadium field after Coach Murphy, potentially naming it Murphy Field. So there's an opportunity for continued gifts to continue to work on that effort at the new stadium. The UWP Choral Festival at the high school. We have a choir concert coming up on the October 24th date. So we really appreciate our vibrancy and our choral program. Great things are happening there under the new leadership of Ashley McHugh. Wisconsin School Board Week. We shouldn't forget our school board members. Thank you for those that are in attendance today for your hard work and dedication toward the school board and for making Mineral Point a great place and a great school district. I'd like to include our President Larry Steffes in that as well. I appreciate you, and hopefully you feel appreciated as well from our staff. A couple of honors. The Wisconsin Basketball Coaches Association recently recognized Dan Burrison for receiving the 300 win mark. It's a pretty high amount of wins for any coach to receive in a lifetime, and Mitch Wainwright was nominated and selected into the Wisconsin Basketball Coaches Hall of Fame, so a great honor for our school district. And with some sad news, the passing of Superintendent Robert Flum. I did not have a chance to meet Mr. Flum, but he served in the Mineral Point School District for 20 years as superintendent, and that's quite a legacy, and he certainly has earned my respect for doing so, and we wish him and his family and belated, or other family members related to him, our sympathies and condolences. And then a quick look back and a quick look forward, just highlighting some of the areas to look forward to. On October 19th, our Cornish friends arrive here in Mineral Point, so we'll be hosting them for a couple weeks, and I will be taking some of their leadership team out to a dinner before our next board meeting on the 23rd. The 20th, I am presenting in Stevens Point, the Wisconsin Technology Institute, sharing our telepresence initiative to other rural schools across the state in hopes that they may learn from what we've done well and where we've had some mistakes and hopefully get their own efforts off the ground. Looking forward to the 24th, again, the choir concert is coming, so looking forward to that. On the 27th is a day where we do not have students. We have a full day of staff professional development. That's only one of 2 that we have available this year for full day staff gatherings. We'll be working on multiple of things in both buildings, so it'll be more building specific, but one of the areas of focus is to further learn about the STAR formative benchmark assessment, or STAR benchmark assessments and how they can also be used for formative assessments or day-to-day assessments. And that training just enhances the product that we currently own. Looking forward to the 30th, the Wisconsin Rural Schools Alliance Conference is in the Dells. This is an interesting conference every year in that it specifically only includes rural schools. And we talk about rural school issues and how to solve rural school problems from a rural school perspective. So it's always a unique opportunity, and that's offered once a year. Lastly is a big celebration every year on our Veterans Day program, which will be before our next board meeting. So certainly mark your calendars as a board if you're able to join us on November 10th for our Veterans Day program at our elementary. It is not to be missed. And that concludes the superintendent's report.
I have one thing to add. I received an email today from the Wisconsin Rural Schools Alliance, which is what Luke was speaking about for the conference. And it copied Luke in on it, so he knows this. But I asked if I could share this at the board meeting tonight, and the director said, yes, you can, but the full public release won't be until the conference. It says, Dear Luke, it is my pleasure to congratulate you on being selected as the recipient of the 2017-18 Wisconsin Rural Administrator of the Year Award by the Wisconsin Rural Schools Alliance. So more to come on that.
Yeah, thank you, Joelle. I'd quickly be the first to give credit to, and I see Carrie's here on behalf, and Brooke is here on behalf of our teaching staff. They're the group that's, I'm sorry, Bridget, I didn't see you around the teachers, oh, heaven forbid. They're doing the hard rowing day in and day out. They are making a difference, and they're the ones that are moving and shaking. You know, if I'm the captain of the ship steering us, they're the ones that are making it happen at the ground level. And I've got a great administrative team that supports, and the board for having confidence in the ability to continue to navigate these challenging times. So thank you. It's really a team effort, and I'm really very proud to represent Mineral Point.
All right, great. I like having you go first like that. I think it's the right thing right up at the front of the meeting. All right, approval of the minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from?
I got a question on it.
Yeah.
The heart monitor.
Yeah. Oh, we're at the minutes.
We're just at minutes.
Oh, okay.
I'll second
I'm
it.
sorry. Sorry.
Second.
I'll second it.
All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Okay. Communications, is there anyone from the audience that would like to address the board on any topic for 3 minutes? No? Okay. All right, credit card statement of activity. Are there any questions regarding that? No? Why don't we, after we get through the questions, do them all as a motion. The accounts payable, any questions on those? Laddie, do you have a question about the heart monitors?
I do. Yes, I do. Who uses them?
That's for physical education, so it'd be Mr. Schmitz and Mr. Schultz.
How many do we have?
Yeah.
Outside the piece.
It would be a classroom set, roughly about 30 of them, 25 to 30. I can get the exact number if I
No,
pull it up.
we bought some before. We had some before.
Yeah, they don't have a classroom set though. They were kind of piloting a small set, but this would actually allow them to do a full classroom set.
They clip on the leg, or how do they work?
That I don't know, if they're leg clips or if they're wrist or chest, that I would have to look at which model they selected.
Have these been purchased already?
No, they have not.
Because if it's 30 of them, for that price is $163 for heart monitor. That seems like a lot.
Yeah, they actually wanted to purchase 60, but because of where our budget is currently, they backed it down to 30. So they're actually only ordering half of what they had hoped to order for this year.
And how many do they need per class?
Classes are roughly, sizes are 20 to 25, and then you'll have occasionally need some extras because batteries will need to be recharged. They sit in a charging station, and or if somebody keeps it on and walks out, then they'll have to get it back from them. But they're all registered by number to kids, so they can track them. But they just need a few extras because they're going to break or need batteries replaced.
Mr. Francois,
Yes.
just one exception, the 8th grade class was close to 30 in each class.
That's right, thank you.
Running at the same time?
Probably, yes.
Okay, do they need to be sanitized after they're done?
I would assume that they're sanitized, yeah.
Who's doing that?
That would most likely be the physical education teachers or the kids. Wipe them down before they store them.
Are they really worth having that much in them?
They are really excited about the program and monitoring fitness for kids, and this is is not unusual in schools now to have pedometers. In fact, some schools actually let you wear them around the clock, and you take them home with you, and you're counting your steps throughout the day into the evening, and then you come back the next day and sync it up. So it's just a way to monitor physical activity, and they
They're
made
not
it,
nearly as expensive.
it is,
Not,
but
your, not, for your foot working at, they're not that high, are they?
You mean a pedometer to catch, just to count steps?
Right.
yeah,
That's what he said.
I believe these have.
I think this is probably more closely related to like a Fitbit with a chip in it that can be removed and plugged into software, individualized for each season.
Yeah. I can look and see if there's more backup, but go ahead.
There is an actual fitness program that they use with
Yeah, there's software that goes with it, yeah,
With the
absolutely.
pedometers?
With the pedometers, yeah.
What's gonna happen when you find out? I mean, what are you gonna do with the results?
They use that to monitor and track kids over time and set goals for kids, wherever their current benchmark is, and they can step it up with additional goals to, and then track those to make sure that the kids are staying active in class. And, you know, this is really probably something that the physical education teachers could speak to closely. We've talked on it on 2 occasions. I didn't anticipate bringing them in because it didn't require board pre-approval for this.
But it's very close.
It
It's,
is.
it's only $100 away. Is there, could we possibly just table that item and have them come and talk about it next month?
It's up to the board.
Is there any privacy issues that, since we're obtaining all this information on a student?
I don't think we're obtaining student demographic information. We're just recording their physical activity, which is something we would want our teachers to establish around PE. So it's certainly
It's
not
called
unique.
fitness tracking, fitness, gearing things towards fitness.
But you're not gonna improve their heart rate using it, are you? And track the fitness. If they don't wanna do something, you're not gonna do it.
Well, certainly you'll be able to track who's not and have a conversation around that, put a plan in place about what we're gonna do if they're not being physically active. So I think that to your point, is trying to capture just exactly who is and who isn't being active and setting some goals to increase their activity.
Was there anything else in that department that was needed more than that?
That was one of their priorities that they requested last spring.
What was the other 2 priorities?
I would have to pull up their whole list of priorities. I don't even know if they had another priority on it, to be honest.
So I just pulled up the website. It looks like it comes with 3 years of software. It comes with a classroom package. It comes with charging all of these things. It comes with the 30 Fitbits and some training that goes along with that.
So that's the exact same thing with Ryan?
I'm on their website.
Yeah,
I looked it up.
with assessment software.
Right, so I think it's more than just like 20 or 30 pedometers. It's an actual package. It's the classroom package. And the price is, I mean, with tax, it would be exactly what it is. So I feel like in case there was the impression that they kept it under the $5,000, I mean, this is like, from their website, it's $4,500 for a classroom package, so with the additional stuff, it's probably why it came to that.
That was how many, 25 or 30?
It's 28 on this thing. The classroom package is 28.
What were the ones we purchased before then?
I think they were just single units. I don't think they were a classroom set, and they didn't come with software. I think it was the first step toward trying to monitor fitness and wellness, and this is a little bit more of a concerted effort to do that from class to class. So they're going to reuse these. In time, I think they'd like to grow the number of pedometers to include more, so that they could have possibly 2 classes being monitored at the same time. But right now, this is the best that they could do.
I mean, it seems to me, and we'll get to this later on the agenda, but you're going to talk about the budget numbers as they are for the year. And, we don't have, we're going to have a shortfall. And you're going to need to look for ways to save money. And that would require deciding what our needs versus what our wants. And I mean, I don't know if this Does this fall into a needs or a wants?
I think when I talk to the physical education teachers, this is the need for their program to take the next step, to move beyond the pickleballs and the battle balls and so forth, and to really bring some robust curriculum into it. I like the idea that they're infusing technology. A lot of kids are wearing more step pedometers and Fitbits and so forth, but this actually would monitor that in a more systematic way. They made a pretty compelling case, and I support they're moving forward with this activity. We did step back again from a group of 60, which would have used the full budget that was put into their allocation amounts, and only went with a half order in effort for us to do some cost savings like you had shared. The unfortunate part about the budget is that we were into the school cycle, and we already went forward with some of our needs that were proposed and asked for in the spring, but not knowing for sure what the exact dollar amount would be until September. We did the best we could with the information we had.
And a little bit I'm struggling with that, I mean, if we're in a scenario where it's no wants and it's only needs, I feel like we should be putting a policy or statement in place so our teachers know that, rather than picking off individual things on our bills of payable. So I mean, I think if we're worried about being in that scenario, then we change the direction rather than individual things. I mean, we have to.
But this is how we would change the direction.
We would individually go through bills payable line by line and say yes or no. I don't think
No,
that's
I
what we
mean,
should do.
when things come before us, and, we review the whole bills payable. And if something does seem like, it's a want rather than a need, then we have a discussion like this.
But we make the decision whether it's, I mean, so they're saying it's a need. If we made an overall policy, or we made some sort of statement that we can only entertain needs, we would then, a teacher would be bringing something knowing that our desire is we are freezing spending. We then would still be able to say, no, we don't think you need this, we think you want this.
I hear what you're saying, it's more about second guessing. But as
Yeah,
far
trust.
as far as saying the needs versus wants, Luke said that to the staff in his 2 for Tuesday on Tuesday.
And this still came forward as a need. One thing that you could do in the spring is we could have all of the teachers that have requests. It sounds like this is, I was going to say, at $5,000 or more, they can come in with, prior to receiving a budget request item, they would walk to the board and share what they are requesting that's in excess of $5,000, and you can give the yes or no, and then we would either put it in the budget or not based on what the board says all at one time up front in the spring. But once it went through that process, the principal approved it, it came in now through the purchasing process, and we've had conversations about it, and now it's before the board as a bills payable, not as a pre-authorized purchase needed. My hope is that you give us the flexibility and latitude to say the two principals or administrators have looked at this and we approve their direction to do so, and look at policy in the future if you want to bring that threshold down to 2,500. And again, we have the staff come in and they can make their case, and then you can say yes or no, and we'll budget around that. But it's hard when we are at the tail end of that budget process to then scrutinize the purchase.
I think part of the problem is that, in the short time that I've been here, that we don't really understand or know or informed on where a teacher's at in their curriculum, where their direction is going. I don't know who presents that, each principal, but if we were aware of how they want to up their game, then we are educated on that. Otherwise, we get this. And then we have to analyze it from Tuesday to this Monday. But since I've been here, we haven't talked about anything like that. And those are the kind of things that curriculum is important for the students. It's important, the teachers get to develop that. But if we know where they're at and where they want to go, if they want to up their game, as Luke says, then that helps us make this decision. So I think there's a gap there. So this is the first time we've been informed that the physical education department wants to up their game, and now we need to make this decision. And of course, we get, that seems like a lot of money, but when we understand where they're coming from and where they want to go and what they're going to do with that, maybe we can make an informed decision based on that information.
When do we approve the technology budget?
That is, we're doing that in late winter, early spring, February, March.
And I wonder if this is an item that would be better suited to being in the technology budget, given,
Typically, the technology budget is district-wide, and this is more building-specific because it only applies to middle school, high school kids. And so it wouldn't necessarily have fallen in the technology budget in the past.
all right, I think we should move on with other questions people might have on the bills payable.
I have a question with Kristen Mitchell Design. Recently, I've been having a lot of comments from people that they like the newsletter, but they question when they hear these amounts of money, because a number of them have said that almost everything in that newsletter has either been put out by Joelle or has been in the local newspaper. So is there a way maybe we could move that to a different direction and cover stuff that isn't already been covered?
Carol, you want to
Sure,
address that?
yeah, I think that's great feedback, and I think when we did the communication survey 2 summers ago, that was what we heard, and we did a little bit of that, with the infographic appearing there first and things like that, but I think the more we can do with that, I definitely agree.
I also recall hearing that it was, that newsletter reaches people that aren't on Facebook, who don't have kids in the district, so it's reaching everybody in the community. And I think with the Kristen Mitchell cost, the majority of that is postage.
A lot of it is, the first, also, just so you guys know too, for awareness, this is the first issue that we produced that we sent to families who have kids in our district but are not living in the 53565 zip code, which I felt was a gap. Because if you have a kid in the district, I feel you should be receiving a district newsletter. So we did that for the first time this year, or this issue, so the cost is a little bit more. The advertising I pulled for this issue in preparation for tonight, just so you know, we roughly get about $600 per issue on advertising, and I have 2 more inquiries for next issues already, so that is growing, and that offsets most of the design cost. So yeah, postage is a big cost. Printing costs have actually,
And printing.
yeah, printing's big, but when we went to the 16 pages, it was actually with a cheaper company. So even though we went more, the cost wasn't double of an 8-page, so it's all interesting.
It's sad we couldn't pick out who does get it, because a lot of people just garbage,
Yeah,
don't even look at it.
it's true.
How many copies did you make?
I think that's roughly 16, no, it's more than that. We just looked at it today, 2,300, I believe, this
2336 were
for
mailed
this last time.
last time. Yeah, that was like 24, it was 100 extra
And I think, yeah, once
that we
we,
used.
this
for
was a
the
kind of a crapshoot with doing it for the
535,
first time
65.
with the list of people who don't live in the district, so we can probably cut that down by 100 for next time.
Could this ever be student-driven through a class?
I think parts of it can be. I would love more student-centered content. I actually have a conversation going with Michelle Riley at the middle school right now about helping her with an enrichment, something like this. So, but I think as far as having the whole design and the whole production be student, we're a ways from that, I think.
So we don't have anything to do with the yearbook layout or anything, students don't?
Students do all of the yearbook, correct.
That can't translate into a newsletter?
I think it can in some levels, but it's different programs for sure. So, we don't have the software capability right now, I don't think. We're getting there with graphic design. I think once that class develops and kids get more knowledge base and to do that, I think we'll grow into that. All good feedback though.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I have the big ideas math the 13,000, is that pre-approved?
That was, and actually it's a reduction from the original cost that was approved that included textbooks. The distributor of the textbooks was behind in getting us the copies. We weren't receiving them by schools times. We just went with the electronic version and pulled out the text version, and we're gonna try to roll with that for this year and see if we can't make do without having a hard copy on site.
And the McGraw-Hill, that was pre-approved, was that the one that Mr. McGraw was?
Mr. McGraw is correct, yeah.
And JR Consulting?
JR Consulting is E-Rate Consulting, so they're supporting us in E-Rate funding.
And then your tire, did they buy food through the summer in August? The food company?
The food company buys food in August, is that the question?
Is that why this bill's on here?
I would assume so, yes. I mean, they're purchasing, which one are you looking at?
$10,000, it's on page 21.
The vendor, Tar. Which vendor?
Doesn't say.
Tar.
E-rate has
No, E-rate is,
Telecommunications, phone.
Yeah, I mean,
internet.
so yes, it's not the site, but it's the.
The federal government's grant.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, there's two conversations going. So the Taher at 10,817, that is for food. Yeah. There is some labor in there as well, so they're just invoicing back to the district, but most of it is food and labor.
Will we get a fiscal year review at some point from last year?
Oh, wait.
A fiscal year review of Chowder
Sure.
from last year at some point?
Yep, absolutely. I'll put it on the agenda for our next meeting.
Are there any other questions on the accounts payable? Is there a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Roll call?
Basting,
Abstain.
Bush,
Yes.
Dolphin,
Yes.
Gunlaw,
Yes,
Hay. Oh, sorry, Stevenson,
Yes.
Hay.
Yes. Okay, now we're at the band uniforms purchase.
And Mr. Nevers is not able to be here tonight. He has another commitment.
Purchases to exceed 5,000.
Yes.
Right, isn't that where we're at?
Letter A.
Oh, so that's falling under that. I thought we were, okay, sorry.
Sorry, you're right.
So Mr. Nevers was not able to be here tonight as he is not in the area, but he did ask for the request to approve Part 2 of a band uniform order. This additional order of the uniforms helps to diversify his sizing. He right now has 3 kids that aren't in the proper sized uniform. And in the next few years, he anticipates he's going to have 50 people that are in band, and currently I believe they have 35 uniforms. So this would complete the band uniform quotation as a purchase made over 2 fiscal years.
So he wants 32 additional uniforms,
Correct. Yeah.
but he only has 3 kids that need different uniforms?
But he also has the band that's growing over time, that he anticipates in 2 years, he will have 50 people in the band, and he will not have enough uniforms to outfit them all.
Both bands or just the one high school?
That would be the entire band, which I'm assuming is everybody that marches in the marching band.
and if he gets them now, he's saving money, because about in 5 years, they'll probably go up again exponentially.
And I think it's probably not even over just the course of 5 years, but like as those, I mean, like I think Owen and like the sophomores, juniors, seniors are those smaller classes, and then the larger band
It's coming in,
becomes up in 8th grade and 7th grade, so already next year it'll probably be
start to kick in.
yeah. I'll move.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
This is a one-time deal.
Yeah, it's Part 2 of a one-time deal. He did the other half last year, so this should serve us well for the next 30 years.
Yeah.
Hopefully not that long.
A roll call vote?
Stevenson,
Yes.
Basting,
Yes.
Bush,
Yes.
Dolphin,
Yes.
Gunlaw,
Yes.
Hay.
No. Only because of the quantity.
Thank you. And then the other item that was added to the hard copy of the board packet in the electronic version, iPad and iPad mini purchase. Carrie Cabot is here to speak to her request for a budgeted item for the inclusion of iPad and iPad minis for students at the elementary school. The amount is $22,440. And Carrie, would you like to just kind of walk the
Sure.
board through? You come up with it if you want to join us in
Yeah,
the chair.
and I apologize for my attire, I came from a volleyball clinic, so. So this is an item that I had budgeted for already. Last year, we had budgeted for 30 devices to go to each team of Chromebooks for the upper elementary. So this was kind of the second part of that, to get some devices for our kindergarten and first grade classrooms. Because the fifth grade that participates in the JDO program, the Chromebooks that have been budgeted for them kind of got passed down into as low as second grade. So currently our kindergarten and first grade classrooms don't have many devices for student use throughout the day. And so this was, instead of having each classroom teacher kind of have this bidding war over who gets devices or who gets to get those things in their budget, a way for us to kind of have control over some kind of a process to get devices to everybody fairly. A few years ago, we decided that it would kind of run through me just because I help manage and distribute apps and all of that. So that this purchase was something that I put in my budget for this year, which was approved through the budget process, but then it's obviously over the $5,000 for the cost. So our first graders and kindergarten teachers put together a little statement about how they would be used in their classrooms. I don't know if you have a copy of that in your packets, okay? But they're very well used. It helps our teachers with being able to differentiate, help them have other ways for the students to demonstrate their learning, allows them the camera access on the iPad, and just the portability is a little bit easier for those young students to be able to do some different things and have the camera to be able to record and record their voice when they might not be ready to type or write something yet, but they can demonstrate how they're learning through a recording or different things like that. So, are there any, and the actual quote for the 22 whatever is 6 packs of 10, basically, for education pricing. So our cost per device is about $374, where a consumer price is $400. So just through the education store, that's the pricing or where it comes to.
And currently, they're using iPads?
Currently, kindergarten has a couple of iPads in their classrooms, but I'm sure that we would like to reallocate some of those to second grade because they have a need for that too with their Wonder projects. And the first graders are using some currently, but there are STEM iPads, which are through a grant that have to be used and allocated to Project Lead the Way project. So those aren't just available at all times. So they kind of are borrowing them when people aren't using them, but all of our classrooms kind of share those iPads for Project Lead the Way.
We have kindergarten teacher, first grade teacher, second grade teacher here to answer any questions about how they'd be using the classroom or to clarify how they might benefit students, if you have any questions.
How much? Who's our kindergarten?
Kindergarten is Bridget Beinborn.
Bridget, how much time does this take up in kindergarten as comparison to their social and emotional learning?
We use them daily during centers, so that's not that all students are using them. So other students are still working on their social skills, but then other students might be working on tracing letters, or they can also be reading aloud into an app where I can then go back and listen to it. There's plenty of different uses for it.
So, what, there's a tactile component to it also? When they draw?
Yeah.
I mean, not just on the screen, there's an actual tactile, what I see is tactile, holding a pencil.
Yeah, so there he scanned the QR code and he's listening to the story read aloud, and then he's responding to the story that he heard by, and then that I get to see what he thought of the story he heard.
And, first grade teacher?
Yes.
When they do research on the internet, do you think that is more beneficial than going to a library and doing a tactile search? Or do you equally do it, or not equally use it as a research, as a first grader?
Well, so far as a first grade teacher, I think there should be a good mix. We've found right now, first graders going into doing the research, a lot of the information that we have is still hard to get in their range right now for their reading levels. So that's something we've looked to pair up with an older class to come and not just focus just on an internet source, but bringing both and merging both together to find, reliable resources and comparing and contrasting what we have found. So we would do both, yeah. For instance, we were talking about addition just Friday, and students were able to go on and record themselves teaching how they would run an addition problem, and they were recording through Seesaw, and then those things can be posted for parents to see also. So it's not just used for only classroom, it's also for us to have a way to show parents what their students are doing on a daily basis. I know in first grade, we post things heavily on Wednesdays when we're doing our STEAM projects. Parents often get videos and pictures explaining what their child has learned.
What do they put out for bids then?
You can't get better than Apple Education pricing on iPads and iMini. They don't have competitive pricing. It's one sale price, no matter which Apple vendor you use. So we did get better pricing than retail through their education store, which is only allowed to sell to schools and related governmental agencies. And so that's definitely the best price that can be found. So to your point, we did get the best pricing, but it cannot be bid out because there's not multiple vendors that can compete against other vendors for the same product.
That's a law, that's just like it.
That's Apple's pricing structure.
Okay.
Was this part of the technology budget?
This was just part of under our building level budget, so not like the overarching technology budget.
It sounds like not every kid in the class is using it at the same time.
Right.
Could you suffice with fewer than what you're asking for?
We could certainly look at that. It was just, we kind of had the number of 30 for a team sharing so that they could, if they needed to have enough devices for everybody to do a whole class, they could share amongst themselves. But then if, they're doing their centers, they have fewer that they can, work with small groups, but then have students working independently as well.
Carrie, can you explain team to define 30?
Oh, I'm sorry, the first grade team of teachers.
Okay.
So they share students all the time for different things through WIN, but they also would share resources like technology resources. So while a set of 10 might be in this classroom, well, this teacher might need all of them for a specific thing to have all the kids on at once to do something. But for the most part, they are working in small groups or like a centers base, like they both said.
Thank you.
You said there's 30 of them?
What's that?
You getting 30 of them?
There would be, so it'd be 60 total devices, so 30 first grade, 30 kindergarten.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Did you guys find these to be helpful for literacy? What kind of a tool are they for your literacy goals?
In kindergarten, there's an app that scaffolds how you write a letter. It'll show for them, then they show where to start. And then there's another one that shows the whole process, so there's a lot of hands-on apps, and there's some listening apps, and there's an abundance that we use them for. And not only literacy, we use them for math also.
I'm reluctant on the kindergarten.
I'm sorry.
I'm reluctant on the kindergarten.
I'm reluctant on the number of them.
You said you wanted 30 so that a whole team, like a whole classroom could use one, but the classes are smaller than 30.
They're 20,
19,
about 20 students probably per class.
We have 3 sections, there's 44 and 53. So between 15 and 18.
The only thing I would add that hasn't been mentioned yet is certainly there's still a diversified way of teaching kids using traditional techniques, but the part that I think is important is engaging kids where they're at. And the kids are doing a lot of activity already on devices, whether they're handheld smartphones or iPads or other. That's kind of where their world is at, and so we're trying to capture them in an area or a genre that they're naturally gravitating to. And you can put a book in front of them and do reading as well as engaging them through technology. There's multiple ways, and we know that all kids don't learn just one way. 30 iPads split between 3 sections is 10 centers per classroom. And you do want to keep some back for potential breakage so that you always have some spares on hand, because this again will be a multi-year purchase. Our current iPads that we've had were probably the first or second generation of iPads when we first started. We just haven't put any new devices in kids' hands, specifically K-1-2, in quite some time.
Well, there's another school of thought also that we don't know how much those students are using outside of the classroom. We also don't know and haven't ever talked about, when we talk about technology, is how we're developing our children's brains and how those connections are being made through technology. And that's why I'm reluctant to put those in the hands of a kindergartner. It has, I'm not criticizing how a teacher teaches. I am examining technology in a kindergartner's hand. And Luke can make that argument. If I had the information here about brain development, I could also make that argument. So that's another side to the coin about putting that into a kindergartner's hands.
Any more discussion? Is there a motion?
Sir, can we talk maybe briefly, I know the budget's later, but I think it's relevant here. In the budgeting process, you give each building X amount of dollars for, each building principal X amount of dollars for resources or requests. They get X number of requests from their staff, review it, itemize it to their dollar amount and give it to you. You at that point review it, approve it, or deny it.
That is correct. In a normal year, we have more time because we know what the budget is going into the fiscal year. Even by mid-year, we can make some shifts so that we can prepare a final budget that reflects those shifts. In this particular year, we started school and still delayed a lot of our purchasing until we could find out exactly where the budget was going to land. We're into the school year, we have these needs, if they're not this year, they're next year, if they're not this year, they're the next budget after that. I don't see the needs going away. This is something that I think will benefit kids, and over a 2-year period, we'll still maintain a balanced budget.
And Matt, you think this is, I mean, you think this is a wise investment for the district, will help our students with the goals we have for them, and our staff with the goals you have for them?
Yeah, the first question I ask when you start adding more devices is kind of what Kelly's already asked, is how does it relate socially, emotionally? Are they talking less with each other? I'm in classrooms daily, and I don't see a decrease in kids connecting with one another. I see a lot of times what you see right there, kids working together on, and not just consuming media, but actually creating it. So that's my second question, is what are they doing with them? And from what I've seen in the primary level, that kids are doing a lot of doing. So that's, I believe not all screen time is created equal. When they're making things with it, I think that's certainly better than always watching. So we are, with literacy specifically, we are trying to communicate, I think, better with families and with kids being more reflective on their learning. And so digital tools can certainly do that, especially with the audio. We're looking at, I know Carrie said the kids make little books online, they have their own illustrations. If we did not have Carrie's support, I might be a little more reluctant, because I don't know if they would be, it's just, it takes a long time to learn these tools, but Carrie's been great about in the classroom modeling for the kids and how to be more creative versus consuming. So, long answer, yes, I think it's a good fit.
I don't always see that translating into the home though, or on the street, or with children, what they learn in school. And I know that there are apps that I probably use with the grandchildren, with the A and the B and, all of those things. So those things happen before kindergarten. I'm still concerned about rewiring the brain not to reflect.
And maybe that's something as a building we can talk about, and develop some building, not policy, but some building best practices around technology. And I think that's a worthy conversation to have, so that we are, even though we have more of the stuff, we're not decreasing the interactions they have with each other. I share that same concern.
Could I ask, like, the center time that they're using it for is 15 minutes, so it's not an extended time. By the time they get into that center, it's a 15-minute rotation, and that would go the same for math rotations also. So it's a limited amount of time, it's more short burst, and there's a lot of interaction going on before, after, and during.
And what they might be doing is reading a book on the iPad, so an app that gives them a large selection in one location. So it isn't necessarily, if you're thinking of an iPad as a game playing app, it might not be that. It might be reading a book or doing a little research on a frog, to find some quick information about that. So it's a lot of reading involved and personal interest in something they might want to go find out for themselves.
They can be able to find out more information also, because some of those places that have books will read them out loud for them and bring some of that information that they wouldn't be able to access otherwise through a book. It would allow them to hear that, so that information can be used for their mini research projects.
Is the kindergarten already using iPads in the classroom? We heard that the first grade is, but is the kindergarten?
2 of our classrooms are, but since we added a section this year, one classroom does not have it. So, yeah,
You said earlier we're gonna have a shortfall in our budget later though. It looks like it.
Yes, most
This
likely.
was included, this won't include that. This won't.
Correct, this is already built into that budget, correct. So it won't add to the school budget or the shortfall.
Or did you anticipate that their classroom, if we pass this, will start using?
Yes.
Yes, okay,
She helped with the statement of.
okay.
All right, is there a motion to approve part or all of this?
we're asking for 60, right?
That was the request, was 60.
I put a motion that we approve 30.
Is there a second for that?
I'll second it.
Let's do a roll call.
Gunlaw?
Yes?
Hay?
Yeah.
Excuse me, okay. Stevenson?
Yes.
Basting?
Yes.
Bush?
No.
Dolphin?
Yes.
And Hay.
Are you,
As
Are you
president.
sure,
you vote.
Julie?
Well, I,
the approval is for 30, not 60.
Here's the thing, if somebody wants to approve more, make a second motion.
so then I'm fine,
You're fine saying yes?
and I would like to move to fully, I would move to get to the full recommendation by the teachers and the principal and the administrator of 60 devices in first and second, third grade, or kindergarten, first and second grade.
Is there a second?
I'll say.
Are we
Roll
sure
call?
that we can do that? Because it's, Robert's rule, it passed 5 to 1, and even if Julie changes her mind, it would be 4 to 2. I don't,
I personally expected a second motion.
I know this isn't, can I add something to that?
Sure.
Because K2 is represented here, just, what if we looked at 60, but made it available K2? So now you're looking at 20 iPads per grade level,
Which is essentially one classroom.
which is one classroom still, but now you're expanding into another grade.
doesn't the second grade already have?
No,
We have about 2, and then we'll borrow quick if we need to.
yeah.
That sounds reasonable.
You just have to make, instead of making a change, you have to make a motion to purchase an additional 30 on top of the 30.
And that would be okay with. Okay, so-
That's a second,
I think
that's
it's
a
fine.
separate.
Carrie,
motion.
that's gonna
not
put more work on
affecting
you?
the first.
No.
Okay.
No.
So I'm making a motion to supplement the 30 that we just approved with the rest of the recommendation, and they will share it throughout K-12, K2, K-12, wherever. You're gonna use them where they have, okay? That's-
Okay.
Is that clear?
So you motion to purchase an additional 30 to equal a total of 60 for use K2.
So it's spread around between 3 grades instead of 2.
Right.
Stevenson? Or
Yes.
I'm fairly confident, I would like to say yes to that.
you made the second for that, correct? Okay, all right, Stevenson, yes.
You
Yes.
vote again?
Yes, we're going to vote again.
Okay.
Basting?
No.
Bush?
Yes.
Dolphin?
No.
Gunlaw?
Yes.
Hay?
No. It's a tie.
Tie.
So in the event of a tie, it does not prevail.
There's no action.
So does this get to come up again at another meeting when we have more people? Or how does that work, Luke?
The board in a subsequent meeting, if somebody that was in the, there isn't a prevailing side to this, but you could make a motion to revisit at a later meeting.
I'll make a motion that we purchase an additional 10, which would at least give us 2 classrooms worth. 30 seems like a number that doesn't benefit a full class.
Why don't we just go with the 30 then?
What?
The additional 30 you're saying.
No, he's gonna.
He voted yes for it.
I know.
I'm attempting to get 2 classrooms worth. Because 30 gives us 1 class and then partial.
Looking for a second to that.
It'll be 40.
It'll be 40
Okay,
total.
say 40. Okay.
I'll second your motion for 10 additional.
Roll call?
Bush?
Yes.
Dolphin?
No.
Gunlaw?
Yes.
Stevenson?
Yes.
Basting?
No.
Hay?
What are we at right now?
3 to 2.
Yes.
Okay, so that's purchase an additional 10 for a total of 40 K2.
Okay. All right. very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Are they still K2 or what grades?
It's K2.
K2 for 40?
Okay, now we're at the items for action. Part of the
Kevin,
agenda.
would you just put the door open? I don't think there's any noise from volleyball, it's just one of the air handlers are not. I'd like to welcome Kevin Epperly from FEH and Greg Callen from Kramer Brothers. Welcome, and please join us in the comfy chairs.
This way.
This is before the board as a follow-up to our last meeting where the board had met with Christie and had asked FEH to come back with, instead of a range of a proposal for a facility assessment, to try to bring that number down to something that's more tight, given the work that would need to be completed here to bring back a conditions report. Secondarily, the board had asked for a proposal from FEH to give a proposal for opening and closing the roof, so that coordination of that effort would fall underneath their management. And so Kevin is here to share both of those items and answer any other questions that you might have with regards to the facilities proposal discussion at our last meeting. Welcome back.
Okay, thank you, Luke. Before we jump into that, I thought it would be appropriate to respond to the other three pieces of work that we approved this to proceed with. Very quickly, one of those was the secure entrance at the elementary school, and we completed that bidding document. It is out to bid to at least 4 different bidders, and those bids are due back here in about 10 days, so we'll have some pricing on that. And Roger is collecting that pricing. He told me he's issued it to 3 or 4 bidders, and we've issued it to 2 actually.
Okay, so 6. So Roger's getting bids and you're getting bids?
Roger's issued it to some bidders, and we've issued it to other bidders, just to make sure we get plenty of folks looking at it.
My understanding is that Roger wasn't gonna do the bidding.
Roger is only helping us select vendors. So what will happen is that the bids will be evaluated in conjunction with FEH to select a recommended vendor to the board for final approval. They have brought some vendors to the table. We have brought some vendors that we've worked with to the table. They all received the same bid documents or request for proposal for that particular project. And they will all submit a proposal back to this district, and then I will work closely with FEH and Roger to make a recommendation to the board for which vendor is in the best position to complete that project at the best pricing given their qualifications.
Are they sealed?
Can't remember if we had
These
a
are
seal.
quote documents because of the dollar value. So quotes are different than bids. So quotes do not have to be sealed. Okay. So that's where that is at. You're probably more aware of where the dust collector is at than I am. And the other piece was the roof inspection. And that was a proposal you approved for us to look at the roof and make recommendations once it was opened up. So this proposal that we have in front of us covers 3 things. And this is actually the 3rd proposal we've provided to you for a variety of different things. But this first one is for facility condition assessment. The previous one we gave you did have a range, and it was an assessment for 1 building. You'll note in there it said 1 building. This one is broken down with the cost to do the assessment for each individual building. High school at $4,000, the elementary school at $3,500. This is a very competitive price. Normally our price would be about 3 to 4 times this. But we see it as kind of a lead-in opportunity, and we have talked to a mechanical, electrical, plumbing design professional that's willing to do a portion of this assessment at a very, very competitive price for us. So that is the price on that piece. This proposal is written so that there's a signature line under each of the 3 items. The second item is this elementary site evaluation. We engaged a civil engineer to assist us in this, to do a traffic study as a portion of the site evaluation at the elementary school site. So we'll develop solutions to improve the bus pickup, drop-off, parent pickup, drop-off, pedestrian access, staff parking, outdoor play areas, secure daytime entrance, and the overall kind of site safety and circulation. And then the third proposal, and this is why Greg Callen is here, because the request here was for us to do the coordination of getting folks here to open up the roof so that we can take a look at it and do our evaluation, with us, and then close the roof back up. So this proposal is the price only for our coordination effort. We've already done a great deal of this. We're not committed to what we've done so far, but we've done this by bringing Kramer Brothers and Greg Callen here, and to help us coordinate with the roofing contractor. Because while we have a little bit of influence with the roofing contractor, a company like Kramer Brothers has significant influence to be able to get contractors to come here, and they provide their own masonry work. And a lot of the issues you're dealing with are at the masonry. So their masons are going to be available very, very quickly in comparison to other masons to be able to come in, open it up, and then put it back together after we do an inspection. We're working with Kramer Brothers already with 2 other regional school districts, so we've got that relationship with them. And they've already made a visit with the roofing contractor to evaluate that. And that's why Kramer Brothers has these 2 exhibits to start to show you some of the evaluation that's already been done in advance of this proposal being approved. And that was done so that if you vote yes on this today, within 10 days, this will be able to take place. Maybe less, depending on the weather.
Sure.
So.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I have a chance to sit with a lot of school board members in the evenings like this, so it's nice to meet another group. Being here is especially important to me personally. My father is a graduate of Mineral Point High School. Grew up in Linden Township and went to a single-room schoolhouse in Bloomfield and graduated from Mineral Point High School. So it's fun to be here. I think I understand your situation at a board level and what you're trying to accomplish. Is there anything before I dive into that that you guys want me to know in terms of what your concerns are, or what your goals and objectives are in terms of what you're trying to accomplish here?
And do you want to take these 3 components one at a time, start at the top, or do you want to keep talking about the
I think as far as like improving, I personally would like to take them one at a time, but start at the bottom.
Good.
I mean, it seems like the most immediate one is the roof.
Yeah, and I can talk to you about the roof. The rest of it, that's with Kevin. So, but I can give you a little backdrop on that and maybe some other things that I think you'll find important. Okay, so let me ask the group a couple questions if I can before I jump into telling you about your situation. Generally, tell me your backgrounds as it relates to design and construction and school projects. No experience, some experience, little experience, commercial buildings. Okay.
Our individual experience on commercial projects? That's what you're asking?
Yeah, your involvement,
yeah.
Your knowledge, your background. Okay. And trust me, I'm not trying to like expose anybody here to something that you don't know anything about. Just trying to gauge it. You're very typical in that respect as it relates to school districts, and we work with a lot of them, so that just helps me in terms of my my backdrop.
If he starts using a lingo that's not normal English.
And I won't go there, I'll help you get there. And so maybe you'll learn something tonight, and granted roofing's not as exciting as technology and Fitbits and things like that, but having a second grade teacher at home, I know what some of those challenges are like as well. So we're a general contractor, okay? We're based in Plain, Wisconsin, which is a huge suburb of Spring Green.
So did you want us to explain our background?
What's that?
Do
We
are we
heard
gonna
everybody
go
know.
around?
Well, yeah, I was just waiting for everybody to
Okay.
chime in.
Okay.
I'm all ears.
Did you know Norbert Christina?
Yes. Well, not personally, no, but know of, yes.
Okay, Norbert Christina was my brother-in-law's brother, so I was aware of Kramer Brothers way back when I was little.
Awesome.
My husband worked with billion-dollar commercial contractors in the electrical business for 20 years, so I'm familiar with commercial contractors and the scope of commercial contracting. I know residential, so I'm familiar with the lingo.
Good, perfect. You'll probably be the one to help me then with some explanation of some of the concepts that
Roger can do that.
we can do here. So we're from Plain. We not only do school work, we do churches, we do rural hospitals, we do hotels, we do commercial buildings, we do cheese plants, food and dairy plants. So our work in terms of construction covers a lot of different industries. And all of this is important for a couple of reasons. When you look at the landscape in southwest Wisconsin, there's a significant Kramer Brothers thumbprint across that landscape. And I'll tell you in a minute why that's important. Currently, we're working at Cuba City Schools, and we're working with Kevin there. We're also working with FEH at River Ridge Schools, and we just started at UW-Platteville, where we're working on the field house there. So we have over 50 school district clients as a company, and what I'd tell you is that most of those districts are rural in some nature. Most of them have very tight budgets, as I heard you talk about money tonight. And we help those districts. We're a guardian of their budget as it relates to buildings and facilities and design and construction. That's our job. I can tell you frankly that Kramer Brothers doesn't care if you spend $1 or $1 million or $10 million. It's our job to help you get the most out of the dollars that you spend, because your budget is your budget, your issues are your issues, and you're trying to get the most out of that you possibly can. But you also want to make good decisions about how you do that so that you don't inadequately address something or fall short of something that you could have had a better solution for if you had spent $10,000 more, whatever the case may be. So the type of work that we do for schools has a wide variety to it. It ranges from us helping facilities and grounds people with references to subcontractors and suppliers in a particular trade, because the district's going to handle that work themselves, and they're coming to Kramer Brothers saying, okay, who's the most competitive, who's the most reliable, who does good work in this particular area, and we'll refer them to subcontractors or suppliers. In other cases, that work requires our involvement. The district wants us to help manage that. They want us to help lead the competitive bidding that takes place amongst those subcontractors. And sometimes, as Kevin mentioned, the scope of the work is work that we do as a general contractor ourselves. So the districts sometimes have us do that. So the variety of our work spans from helping districts address roof issues, to secured entrances, to reconfiguring classrooms, to redoing interior space, to additions to their schools, and obviously new schools as well. So it kind of covers the gamut in terms of the work that we do for them. How we work, as I mentioned, is that we're a guardian of that budget. We solicit competitive bidding in anything that you ask us to manage. Okay, so we go to the market and say, here's the pool of competitors. We bring you that list of subcontractors. Sometimes you as board members will say, you know what, Greg, there's a local guy that I don't see on this list. I don't think that'll happen, but maybe it will. Or there's somebody down the road that we know of that might be. Our responsibility to you as a school board is to make sure that everybody that's bidding on your work is qualified to do that work, okay? And has experience and a background so that you get what you know, are looking for. But it's competitively bid so that you get good value for that, and you can then, you know, award contracts based upon that. We're also an independent contractor, which means that We don't care if the subcontractors and suppliers are union or non-union. We don't care about that. What we care about is that they're qualified to do the work. So depending upon the work that the district asks us to do, in some cases, there are both union and non-union subcontractors that did that work. The last thing is that it's totally open book, okay? You see everything. Any fee that we charge the district for our work is very clear, and then the rest of it is just the subcontracted work that falls into that. So I oftentimes, in the scope of our projects, we bring school board members in to look at bids, to see how they come in, and to understand how the process works. So that's a big part of it. Relationships is really at the core of those districts that I talked about. Our focus is Southwest Wisconsin. We don't run all over the Midwest doing projects. We travel out of the area and out of state for some of our other project work, but our school district work is really focused on Southwest Wisconsin and the districts that are here. In case you didn't know, we did work for the district back in 1958 and 1968 on some small projects for the district. So it's, yeah, it's, I wasn't involved, but those data. So that's
their experience, and that's why we kind of brought them to the table. So, questions on the roof proposal?
Your fee for coordinating this includes their fee?
No. Their fee is essentially the cost of construction of taking the wall apart, working with a roofing contractor to do the metal side, they'll do the masonry side, and then putting it back together. I have not given you a cost for the construction side of tearing the wall apart. What you asked me for was, what would the cost be to coordinate getting contractors here to take it apart and put it back together? So that's what the $1,800 fee is.
Okay, so let me get to, I know where you're going. Let's get to that, okay? I'm going to take you on a
What's he
little
gonna say?
short journey to get there, okay? So that we all kind of know what we're looking at, okay? Here's your school, okay? The blue is standing seam roof. What I mean by standing seam is you see these prominent seams that are there? They kind of stand up when you put a metal roof together. That's why it's called standing seam. So it's a standing seam metal roof on the blue part. This gray part that you see on your overhead shot on the school, okay, that's a membrane roof. What you have is a ballasted membrane roof, which means if you go up on top of there, there's gravel, like that sits on top of the membrane, okay? So that membrane that's underneath there is not fully adhered to your building. It's partially adhered, and the rock, gravel, helps hold it down, okay? Everybody with me on that so far? Okay, and here's a little bit on the pros and cons. When that decision was made to put a metal roof on there, okay, there's a couple of things that probably went into that decision, okay? Aesthetics is always part of it with a metal roof, okay? Whether you like that or not, but that was typically some of the
years
decisions.
ago, the board that made that decision.
Yep. They typically don't rust, okay? Now you might see it where the metal gets cut, you might see a little discoloration, but within the general field of it, the large scopes of it, like you see in the overhead shot here, okay? Pretty much the same color, things like that, okay? It's low maintenance, generally speaking, okay? That's why people go to metal roofs, okay? Now the flip side is that those things typically cost more, sometimes up to twice as much as that membrane roof, okay? The challenging part about those kind of roofs is what you see, I'll show it in the overhead first. Not the big spans of the blue metal roof, but all the valleys and transitions.
And where it
Okay.
meets the masonry.
And where it meets the masonry at the top of the wall, and where it meets the membrane roof at the top.
And the gym wall.
And wherever you have penetrations. Okay? That's where you get challenges in roofs, okay? So that's kind of just a little bit the pros and cons on that. So let me tell you what we found when we got up on the roof and we looked at it with a roofing contractor, okay? As simple as this looks right here, that thing's a pretty complicated roof, okay? And it's complicated for a couple reasons. You got the standing seam and membrane, you got two different roof types that are up there, so that's part of the complication. And there's lots of these transitions and angles that are in here, which is part of the other reason that it's complicated, okay? I told you about that membrane roof and that it's not adhered. What you have up there right now, you can see it a little bit here, is that some of that rock is a jagged-edged stone. Frankly, honestly from Greg, wrong stone. It should be the really rounded stuff is what you put on a ballasted roof,
There's a
okay?
few sharps in there, and the other thing you see is some of the rocks have fractured. And you can see like one rock and there's 4 pieces of it there, and it's created sharps. Typically, you don't leave the ballast on for more than 25 years. This is only 21 years, but you've got a lot of sharps. And those do start to cause some cuts.
They start to cause some cuts, okay? And what you see on this picture down here in the lower left, you see where the rock is and then the membrane is exposed, okay? That rock, when you guys have got heavy rain, has pushed itself to the outside because the pitch isn't exactly right on that roof, okay? So then you've got a little problem here because when that roof pipe, or when that rock goes to the outside, it creates a little pool right there, okay? So where that membrane's exposed, that fills up with water first, and then finally when it gets high enough to overflow the rock, then it runs to the outside. Bad deal.
So
That's
the
not what
pitch
you
on
want.
the membrane is wrong, on the flat roof is wrong?
The pitch on here is not right, plus
Okay.
the rock is over time just pushes itself to the outside. So that's
So the-
part of your deal.
So the pitch needs to be corrected?
That, well, we'll get to the correction here in a second.
Snow and ice pushes the rock around. It's kind of like a glacier.
Yeah, exactly. Here's the other, no, so that's kind of the membrane roof. Then you've got some issues on the masonry here. Let me show you what you got here, okay? You see this line that goes up? I'm sorry, I'm not very steady with my pointer.
Oh, where you?
Yeah, you're good, you're good. If
There's
I
a
could just hold it
vertical-
steady. See that? That's called the control joint, okay? And the problem that you have in that masonry is, do you see how thick that is? Or how skinny it is? It should be as wide as those mortar spaces between the brick, and it's not. And what we use control joints for on masonry is that brick expands and contracts with the weather conditions, okay? And you need to have enough size in there to be able to allow that expansion to take place and contraction. And when it's too tight, you got a problem. Because it could cause problems up in here on top of the wall where it's capped. Because it's just not allowing the brick and the wall to move the right way, okay? So that's part of what you got there. Then you see in all these transitions, this that I'm pointing to right here is just blown up of this, okay? You see how this is caulked between the standing seam roof and your masonry that goes up to the top of your gym wall here where it's capped? That caulking is the wrong product, okay? And so that needs to be redone because it's not accomplishing what it's intended to do right now.
My understanding from Roger is that the caulking only lasts 5, 6, maybe 7 years and you have to replace it. And this is caulking that's been added over time.
Yeah.
Caulking on caulking?
I don't know if they stripped the old stuff out, but this is somebody who came back in and just filled that up with caulk to try and keep it sealed up.
Here's a couple of your other conditions. See this right here by your front door? Okay? And when I walked in tonight, you know, that beautiful 1996 stone
You
that's
saw
in
us
that?
looking at.
Okay? See how it's all discolored and it's
You
not
walked in,
right
we were
there?
standing.
Well, the reason for that is that all that rain comes off your standing seam roof right here, and it should go down in here and drain, but there's no flashing right here to deflect that water to go where it needs to go, and so it hasn't been flashed in detail properly. Okay, flashing is just how we use metal in transitions between roofs and walls and windows and things like that. Okay, so that's why you got this massive overflow when you get heavy rains, and it's running right down the side of the which you don't want it to do. The goal here is to keep the water off the masonry, and that's why you got a problem right there.
Brick acts like a sponge. It's a clay product and it absorbs water.
I'm confused. You've already sent this out for bids. What was
No,
going
no,
out
no.
for?
Nothing's gone out for bids on this.
Okay,
You are,
just the opening up.
basically, you've approved a proposal from me to study this and determine what are the problems and what are the potential solutions. And then because you weren't getting a roofer and a mason here in a timely manner, you asked me for a proposal to get a contractor here to come and just open it up so we can study it
Right.
and tell you solutions. And in an effort to make this move quickly, I've asked Kramer Brothers to be the mason, and what would it take to get them to come here and to get a roofing subcontractor here to get this opened up?
Yeah, so I'm done with that part,
So
so,
we're not talking, this isn't a proposal to fix the roof, this is a proposal to figure out what's wrong with it and to do investigation, to take it apart and put it back together.
the other areas where you may have some problems, where the leaking may be coming from, is like a valley like this right here, where you got some of this on your membrane, and some of this flashing detail right here in the caps, okay? So here's what we need to do.
What's wrong with the caps and the flashing?
What's that?
What's wrong with that caps and the flashing?
This cap right here?
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it,
yeah.
but there could be a problem here because of this, how this is flashed here, and then you see that seam right there? You know, and if that was done properly, then it should be overlapped, and there's a detail underneath there according to the plans. We looked at the plans, the original plans, to see if that's done. So we'd want to see that that was done properly. The hard part is that, you know, you're trying to find the answer, and it's almost like a surgeon where you're trying to say, okay, well, which parts are we going to open up to take a look at to find out what our problem is? Because we know we got a problem, right?
I thought it was already decided what was gonna be opened up, that it was gonna be over the doorway.
There was, and I'm not sure you've got a direct picture of that, but it would be,
You could look at this. You might-
Yeah.
Right here?
that is definitely one of our largest areas of water, but that is not the area that was going to be opened up.
The high gym wall that is in the upper right, where the slope roof comes into it, has had continuous issues, I've been told. All the issues were pointed out to us by Roger when we walked the roof. And it's not just one area,
Right.
it's a half a dozen areas.
So we think there's 4 to 6 different conditions that you need to open up in order to find out what you got, okay? It's where the parapet wall cap is, that we looked at over here, okay? It's also the valley condition that you have, okay? It's the roof to wall in the lower part, like here, okay? But then also roof to wall in the higher parts on the gym.
And where was the masonry issue in this wall?
It's in several places.
At the entrance, the
Yeah.
one that's there.
The expansion joints are pretty much the same throughout the building.
Okay.
They're pretty much the same.
The other kind of big challenge is when you have a metal roof, when you look at the two, they look like little dormers over the entry lanes. They're coming in at different angles. So you have two different things coming in at a different angle. When you're working with metal panels that are not just a flat sheet of metal, but they're a profile. And they're coming in, and if you look at the image on the upper right, what the contractor did with these two sheets that are coming in at different slopes that have open profiles, he riveted all those panels coming in to those, and then somehow they used sealant between the two metal panels, and then riveted it after this bead of sealant was put there. But you got one metal panel coming in, and it's not this flat sheet of metal, it goes up and down, and because it's coming in at a weird angle, the standard pieces of metal that you get to fill those ends, like if it was on a gable edge, don't fit. They don't fit into those weird profiles at different angles. So what they did was they filled it with different products. And the other challenge you have there is metal roof needs to move. When the sun hits metal, you know how it moves? It all needs to move around. And because it's riveted, it doesn't allow it to move. So it does this, and it opens up. And it opens up the sealant joint. And you have water coming in those valleys, especially when there's ice and snow on the roof. And as soon as that opens up, capillary action, which water will run uphill with capillary action, you don't even need wind. It'll go right up into that space. So there's a lot of water and moisture inside your metal roof condition.
We don't think any of the roofing leaks are in the, what I call the major field
Yeah, the
of that
big field of
roofing.
the roof.
The big field of the roof.
It's the joints.
It's it's all the transitions, it's all the joints, it's all those spots. And so that's why we would suggest, and you guys can decide what you want to do, but we would suggest opening up 4 to 6 of those spots. They're different in character and profile, like I tried to explain to you there. And for us to do that, we can be out here in a week to 10 days and do that for you. We would be out here with a roofing contractor for 2 days. Okay, it's one day to open it all up,
And we'll be
and it's
here to
and it's another day to close it all down.
everything. Find
Okay.
out what was really done that we can't see. What did they really do there? We can see a lot of what was done, but we can't really see what's going on underneath.
So when Roger showed you, did he show you all the where all the pans were up above the ceilings in those areas?
All the areas that he's showed us, we would tie those 4 to 6 spots into where the major problems areas are on the
He
inside.
showed us some stuff on the inside, and
He
he
did
did
show
this
you
separately with us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
He showed some things on the inside, we went on the roof and we walked the entire roof, and he pointed out the different areas where they're getting leaks.
So you
Some
know
are
how-
obvious why, some aren't so obvious why they're leaking.
So the pans could, the origin of the leak and the pan could be any place.
It could be
Sure.
30 feet away.
Yeah,
It could be 30 feet away.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's why, you know,
That's
we
why
want to
you
be tactical
find
about where
where you
we
choose.
kind of decide those spots so it can show us the most, if you will.
Yeah.
Okay? So then, what we would do is come back to you and say, here's what we would suggest, and/or here's the options to do that. So it's basically diagnose and recommendation. From Kramer Brothers' perspective, we don't think there's anything wrong with the major field of the metal roof. Okay? If you've got trouble in those transitions and joints, I think that can be addressed. The membrane roof that you have here needs to be replaced and done properly.
Well,
So-
it's beyond its life. It's
Yeah.
already 10 years old, it needs to be replaced.
Yeah. So
Um,
it's,
So all of this?
Membrane roof,
membrane
it's
roof.
Yeah.
a 20-year roof.
Yep.
Okay.
So again, there you'd have a decision to make relative to a fully adhered membrane roof or a partially adhered membrane roof, and, you know, how to,
Does fully adhered need gravel?
No.
No.
And there's anchored, and there's different colors.
So you would separate the cost of a non-membrane and a membrane, and and then the extra cost would be gravel.
yeah, here's how this would work.
Okay.
Kevin, once we did all that opening up and looking at it, and then come back to you and say, okay, here's the doctor's recommendation. Kevin writes the spec for that, okay? And then we bid it to roofers.
Yeah, we're not even talking about that today. We're just
Right.
talking about the investigation.
That's how you would do that. So I was just trying to play the
Yep.
scenario, because you're asking me kind of where it's going here.
That's
So,
okay.
well, the thing you don't have in your hands is, what's the price from the contractors to come and open 4 to 6 of these areas up and then put it back together?
We do that on a time and materials basis, okay? I think for us to be out here with the guys that we would need to do that with a roofing contractor to do that, is somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000, okay? And
Open and close.
that's open and close, yep, that's to open it up and put it back to where it was, okay? That's what we do.
Did Roger mention, and I don't know any of these terms, say it in layman's terms, there's holes in the brick for something, and they have to put rubber behind it. And the rubber that the contractor used said was a bad company, went out of business after a year, and the son ate away the rubber. Did he share that with you?
He pointed out a couple of those. You're talking about, those are weep vents?
Yes.
Vents.
The rubber is that.
Right, then the flashing that was there, we typically don't use that product. The best product is copper or sheet metal. Because the rubber only lasts so long in the sun, and that was the wrong product, is what he said.
So Amy,
There's
you
always
asked
backup.
about was the weeping vents, is that what you asked about?
Yeah, they were, those were
Just
weeping.
the concern the original contractor
Yeah.
was with. I just wanted to make sure.
And part of that breaking it open is gonna tell us how good or bad that, call it underskin if you will, is. That's an important part to making sure that the entire exterior of the building
And the
stays.
flashing could be totally degraded inside the wall at this point. And the recommendation might be to come back and put in copper or stainless steel or another reinforced product.
So, when you talk about, the control joints, are the control joints all around the building a factor in the roof?
Not necessarily, no. The only control joints that are factored in the roof really is where the brick is above the roof. So where the gym wall extends up.
Yep.
Right, yeah.
When you have a control joint, for one thing,
Right there.
you're relying on sealant. And
Okay.
sealant only lasts so long.
Okay.
And but it is a standard product that's used in construction. So once the sealant degrades from sunlight, basically, or what might be in the rain, you have to fill it up because it starts to open up on edges, and as soon as it starts to open up, the water finds its way in. And the more water that gets in, it degrades the wall from the inside.
In defense of some of the work that was done years ago, okay, there's different products today, and they're better, okay? And so, I'm just being candid with you, were there some mistakes made? Sure. Were there some things that might have been done differently? Sure. None of us can change that, you know? But I think there's solutions here. If you want to get to a watertight building, I think you can get there. The question is, nobody wants to spend that money, right? Nobody wants to spend that money. I mean, I am always the bearer of bad news. Greg, give me a better option than that. Well, I don't have a cupcake on a plate, I'm sorry. I'm trying to fix your water problem, okay? And I think all of us just need to realize that. So it's my job to help you with Kevin outline those options,
Right.
understand what those things cost, and the pros and cons with making that decision, and then you make your decision as a group. Right?
You're gonna go up with how many roofing contractors? You said a roofing contractor, you mean
One.
one?
What we need is somebody to take the roof apart and put it back together. That's all we need. And we need somebody to take the masonry components of that wall apart and put it back together.
When
That's what we're
you
talking
do your solution, that's when you bid it to half a dozen.
Yes.
So you'll use this to come up with the, after you're done doing that, and then you write up the specs, is that included in the fees?
After we're done doing this, the only thing you're gonna get from us is a report on what we found that's wrong and a series of recommendations of how to fix it with budget ideas of what those fixes would cost. You'll decide how you wanna fix it and when. If you wanna engage us to put a specification together, that's a whole different fee. Obviously, we don't even know what the fixes are yet, so I can't give you a proposal for those today.
But what we're paying for will include a ballpark estimate of the fix?
Yes.
Correct.
Of different
Correct.
options
Yep.
of repair.
And then hopefully through competitive bidding, then, you get to a number. I want you all to realize something. This is a mess that nobody wants to work on. Okay, from a roofing contractor's standpoint.
Roofing contractors don't want to fix other people's problems.
Right, and so I want you to realize as well as a board that they're going to limit how they stand behind that work, okay? Because they didn't create it in the first place, okay? So that perfect solution where it's watertight, somebody's 100% accountable, and I don't have to worry about this again, it's probably not there, okay? So I'm just trying to prep you for,
This might be one of the situations where you got a car that's got 10 things wrong and we're gonna fix 8 of them. And we think we might have it all fixed, then a year later, we may have to come back and fix another couple things. Because you've got a complex roof here. A lot of different conditions going on.
I'll share with you 2 examples. Richland School District and Reedsburg. Richland had a quote to do roofing repair. Actually, they had a quote on a membrane roof area like this to completely replace it. They had that quote from some contractor to do that. We went up there with a roofing contractor and looked at it, and the end solution saved the district hundreds of thousands of dollars. And they didn't have to go to the extent of the repair and replacement that you needed to. What I'm back to there is what Kevin referred to and what I refer to as being the guardian, okay? I'm not suggesting that somebody's gonna do something wrong, okay? But we deal with roofing contractors every day, every week, all the time. And so there's kind of an accountability, if you will, when we're right there with them, because they can't take the extent of something further than we really think is necessary, because we're kind of there to watch over it and make sure that that's the case. So that's just kind of how it rolls a little bit. And that played out for both of those 2 school districts, who their facilities maintenance people are doing their job, okay? They got roofing contractors up to look at it, okay? But we were able to drive the cost of that down significantly. And now they've got money to use towards other things rather than towards their roof, because my guess is if I polled all of you, none of you want to spend money on a roof. Maybe there's one. So thank you for putting up with my kind of long circled approach to do that. Thank you for your patience on that. But hopefully you understand better today than you did when I started 15 minutes ago. Yep.
Does the board want to act on, or discuss and/or act on number 3 before we move into 2 and 1, just to get closure around 3? Or you want to table this and discuss it after they've departed? You've got a lot of options.
What do you guys think?
I think we should vote on it. I make a motion.
Let's be clear, we're gonna, up till now, you're gonna get these prices, not the contractor tear it out. But you're gonna go ahead and get them with no check.
What you're voting on is $6,500 to $12,000 for us to open up the roof, do a thorough investigation, and come back to you with recommendations of what needs to be done. That's it.
Because it's
With
not
us.
that little 6x6 area, it's a
No.
major area.
And that recommendation to be done will help provide that input to Kevin, would be an estimate of what we think that those solutions and/or solutions would cost.
Are you talking 12,000 plus the guy tearing the wall out, or is that gonna include his?
That includes.
That includes.
That's right.
And
He just put our numbers together.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what you did.
My number's like 2,000, his is like 5 to 10.
Okay, that's okay.
So, and after the examination, we get the proposals for it, or we get the,
You get the report. We're gonna
We get the
provide you a
report. okay,
And I'm gonna tell you that his solutions are gonna cost you from X to Y.
that's it,
Roughly.
yes.
Okay,
yes.
this is what I think,
So we
because
get
we've
the
been to the
estimates.
market all the time, so we know what cost per square foot is on a membrane roof covering that amount.
So we get scope of work and estimates.
You're good, yeah, recommendations, and estimates.
Yeah.
Then it'll go out to bids.
If that's what you
If
choose.
you
to do.
If that's what we
decide.
choose.
Yeah. If you turn to us and say, Greg, take it out for bids, you're good.
So is there a second on Kelly's motion
What was Kelly's motion?
to approve the
Item 3.
Item 3.
3 on the, well, actually. it's
And was Kramer
more than
Brothers.
that. Yeah.
Item three
Is
includes
there any,
the cost of living, including, it's
any
just,
kind of cost guarantee
Plus
we
the
can
5 to
get?
10.
it's in there as part of actual direct.
Yeah, 5 to 10 is pretty broad, but I'm assuming we took 10 to the high end.
Okay, gotcha.
You want not to exceed 10?
Well, I'm just,
Yeah,
it's hard for us to approve something
Yeah, well,
that's wide
You should,
open.
yeah.
if you want to cap it at 10, Greg's happy capping it at 10. My goal is to be somewhere between that, but I've got to get equipment there and guys there, and I tell you this, because
And
this is just the way we
They don't know what
work.
they're gonna open up when they get up there.
If I open up that wall, okay, and I need to go a little bit further because I want to come back to you and tell you, I think I found the source of the problem here, I don't want to just stop because that's the case. That's why I gave you the range that I did.
Right.
I'm here to help you.
And I'm not
diagnose your
saying
problem.
10's the number, is there or not, it's just, it's
You-
hard
you
to
said
approve
you'll
and
cap it at
open.
10.
I'll cap it at 10.
But that means we're getting, I don't want you to have to stop your job, so if the number's higher, that it won't go over. Do you know what I'm
Keep
saying?
going,
Yeah,
won't change.
yeah.
I mean, it's a-
I
I
can
understand.
tell
You want both things.
I don't know.
I
I
know.
want a.
Guess what? If it goes over 10, it won't go over 10. Meaning, our guys are we're gonna keep figuring it out,
Okay.
okay? You don't have that today, but that's the trust and confidence when Sauk Prairie School District picks up the phone and calls me and says, Greg, I got this problem. You know, okay, so,
Appreciate that.
but that's, yeah, I know where you're coming from. I'm with you 100%. You're trying to make sure, okay, I don't want this thing to be something that it shouldn't be. You're just trying to figure out your problem.
Yeah.
We got a second?
I'll take it.
So the motion, just to be clear, has the additional cap at 10 from Kramer
For
Brothers?
Kramer Brothers, yep.
Okay. Whenever you're ready.
Kelly, or Gunma,
Yes.
Stevenson,
Yes.
Basting,
Yes.
Bush,
Yes.
Dolphin,
Yes.
Hay.
Yes. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. 1 and 2 a little faster, but we don't have to talk too much.
Yeah, exactly. I won't give you all the backdrop at the end, next time I come. Thanks
Bob,
thanks for
you
having
had
me. Bob was my uncle.
I've done it.
Yeah.
Okay. Which one do you want to talk about? 2, you want to go in reverse?
Sure, why don't we go with 2?
Okay. So 2, obviously at the elementary school, this is all about the elementary school site. You've got many challenges on how the site functions, conflicts with parent pickup, drop-off, buses, you name it. So to do a real traffic study, we need to engage a civil engineer. We found a civil engineer who's willing to do this at a very competitive price. Honestly, this price is about half their cost and about half our cost. To basically look at the whole site, develop solutions, again, assign potential budgets for it, and kind of create, here are the challenges, here are the solutions, options, here are budgets for what it might be to correct these or develop these solutions better. Make it a safer site, more functional site.
Doesn't 2 sort of go hand in hand with 1? I mean, if.
One's inside the building,
Okay.
and 1 is a code, maintenance, and ADA. So this isn't about how could the building function better, and do we need more first grade classrooms? That's a programmatic study. This is code, maintenance, ADA. This is so that you've got a tool that can tell you what kind of investments do you need to make in this building for the next 10 years. Code-related, maintenance, ADA.
We had an ADA, we had a compliance audit. I mean, you know, like any school that's routinely.
Yep.
Did that not include an assessment of our ADA compliance?
It wouldn't have looked at the site itself, it would have looked at more policy and procedures.
Okay.
It wouldn't have measured, and things obviously were built to code, but would they be ADA accessible in today's language? You know, the incline of ramps and entry and exits into buildings and so forth wouldn't have been part of our
The
original.
timing of a door closing, the weight of opening a door, these are all ADA compliance issues.
They did measure the rooms, for that time they measured the rooms.
Measuring the rooms, you're saying?
I think they did on that inspection.
Yeah, that was a different study, did do a measure of the classroom size, yes. This would not be that. This is looking at a different set of.
I know,
Okay.
So the outcome of number one is gonna be about you getting a report that says, 5 years from now, you may need to replace this portion of the roof. So we'll categorize them as urgent, required, and recommended. Urgent stuff means you should address this in the next 18 months. Required means this is code required or required by law. You really need to address this. It may not be an urgent, imminent safety hazard right now, but it's required by code and you need to address it. And then recommended, maybe things where we see efficiencies that would make sense to do, and we just make them as recommendations. Each item will have a budget assigned to it, and you'll have an idea. You can put kind of a maintenance plan together for the building for the next several years. What things we want to address, and address them in a way so that you don't end up spending that money twice.
I would move that we approve the facility condition assessment at the elementary school, the $3,500. See where that goes and put everything else on hold in light of the fact that we're currently not looking at a balanced budget for the year.
That was my concern. I'll second that.
This is including the doors for the school.
That's already done.
It's already
That's
done,
done.
and
Okay.
our work effort is nearly complete.
So can we have a roll call vote?
What are you saying?
Or is there more
Lisa?
discussion? It's the number one item, and it's just for the elementary school.
Priority over number two?
Yeah, that was my motion.
You have a motion and second, we can come back and address a larger scope or a different scope. We have to handle the motion.
So to approve the facility assessment condition at the elementary at 3,500.
Yes.
Seconded by Jeff?
Correct.
Okay. Hay,
Yes.
Stevenson,
Yes.
Basting,
Yes.
Bush,
Yes.
Dolphin,
Yes.
Gunlock.
No.
Do you have an additional motion?
Yes.
Okay.
You wanted just elementary, right? Lisa?
At this time, I'm not.
At this time? If we forego the high school, is this one I can include number two, Luke? I'm trying to get this additional motion thing down.
Yeah, you could include number 2, or what I'd call it 1A, the high school, or you could combine 1A and 2 together.
One, B, the elementary school, and number two, the traffic study
So
for the solution.
1B has been approved, so you'd just be asking for an
For-
additional number 2.
Additional number two.
Would that be your motion? The site evaluation? Which
Yes,
would
my
be the
motion would
exterior.
be to, yes, number two, the site
So
evaluation.
is it just number two, or is it 1A, the high school, plus 2?
No, I don't want to include the high school, I just want number two.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, is there a second on Kelly's motion for approving number 2, which is the evaluation of the,
I'll second it.
roll call?
Gunlaw,
Yes.
Hay,
No.
Stevenson,
No.
Basting,
No.
Bush,
No.
Dolphin.
Yes.
All right, are there any other motions on this subject? Well, thank you.
Okay.
If we can
Thank
take
you.
a recess, I'll sign those documents on the way out, so we don't have to exchange facts tomorrow.
Give them done.
I think recess is a
Well,
good
I'm
idea.
sorry, I'm gonna sign the documents here with Kevin. I just wanna thank Greg and Kevin for
Yeah,
back.
thank you.
Thanks for having us.
It's nice to reconnect again. So we'll take just a 5-minute recess.
Did you
Did you get
Yeah,
the 4 notes on that?
The family roots, yeah, go way back. but
Junior
here's
reset. Next on the agenda is statewide test results. Mitch is absent tonight. He did speak to me about his ability not to be able to attend. But we have Matt and Vicki here. Do you want to come on up and join us? It'd be great to have you walk us through. And the forward exam, the ACT Aspire and the ACT are assessments that we're going to speak with the board about because they are now released and no longer embargoed. This is in preparation for the release of the statewide report card, which will come in a secured form in the middle of October and then released, I think, the first part of November is when we actually get our report card data. So this is a precursor to it. It gives us some indication of how we do, but the report card takes in other measures that includes attendance and it includes closing gaps and it looks at some other measures. But proficiency is still one of the main pieces. So just a quick walk through with the board of the WSAS, which is the Wisconsin Student Assessment System. It's a statewide assessment process that looks at trying to prepare kids for college and career readiness. Essentially looking at what kids know in core academic areas and whether they can apply what they know. We're going to look at the WSAS in detail today, and what we use that for as an administrative team when we come back is it helps us to address where we need to focus on areas of improvement and where we can celebrate some of our growth and accomplishment achievements over time. So what we're going to look at specifically is reports based on proficiency and advanced that also then does have areas that where kids are determined basic and below, but what we're comparing is how many kids are proficient and are advanced. When we talk about proficiency, we're just assuming that includes kids that are advanced because they've already superseded the mark of proficiency. So we're going to be looking at those rates today in comparison to last year. This information is useful. It's useful to parents if they're looking at their own child's development over time. It's important for our educators so we can, and we do use our data to drive decision making about what we need to make a curriculum change or a resource renewal or look at changing our pedagogy or strategies. And the public gives them the accountability that they're looking for, that their taxpayers' dollars are translating into better school performance over time. So in 16-17, there's really 3 areas that we're going to cover, 2 more in depth than others. The forward exam, that covers grades 3 through 8 in English, language arts, and mathematics. It covers grades 4 and 8 in science, and grades 4, 8, and 10 in social studies. The dynamic learning maps really is geared for students with significant disabilities. They're not able to take the forward exam. And so that is covering grades 3 through 11 in ELA and math, 4, 8, and 11 in science, and 4, 8, and 10 in social studies. That's roughly less than 1% of our population, so we're not going to focus an exorbitant amount of time on the DLM, dynamic learning maps. But I want you to know that those students are tested, and we do look at those results and try to build in career readiness goals for them as well. And then the ACT suite actually takes into 2 components. Grades 9 and 10 is the ACT Aspire, and then all kids in grade 11 take the ACT in writing. That covers reading, English, language arts, math, science, and writing. And there's also the work keys in grade 11. So let's start with the elementary school. I'm going to put the data up. I can blow this up, or if you can, I think this is projecting pretty well. But Matt, why don't you walk us through what's happening at the elementary and the forward from 15-16 to 16-17?
Sure, the forward's been around now 3 years. I thought we'd just do 2 years. As you can see on the last year's data, 30%, for example, 30% of 5th graders were deemed advanced. If you look at last year's fourth graders, it's the same group, you've got to have that. So that was promising. I think every grade level that came up increased. So if you go to third grade in 2015-16 advanced, you go to fourth grade, again it doubles. What do we attribute this to? I think the PLC process, just being more strategic about how we're working with kids and having the Wednesday afternoons to talk as a staff has been really helpful. And then the RTI piece as well, response to intervention. You've met Kimberly and Rachel, and they do a wonderful job in getting kids what they need. So, and I think what's most promising to see is in the below basic levels. You'll notice previous year it was 7%, 17, 20. If you look at last year's, no more than 11%. So what that means is the kids who are really below grade level, we're getting them to at least basic. And when you look at that 11%, 10%, you're talking probably a kid with a significant learning disability, most likely. I'd have to mind down. That little gray area there, that's just 2 kids who didn't test. Their parents opted them out. So that's language arts. Math looks very similar. Again, we decreased, it stayed about the same actually for kids. Math has always been a stronger suit, I think, in the school. I've talked to the staff about that. That's why we're focusing on literacy. So that pretty much stayed the same. I would just say maybe the more kids are proficient and advanced than previous years, but it's very close. The data is very similar. It wasn't a huge change. So one gap we wanted to look at was how do our kids do with a disability or without a disability, and you can see there's just a big gap. How do you decrease that? I think you just make every classroom a great place for kids to learn, and one thing we are doing that you're aware of is co-teaching. So we're bringing the special ed teachers into the classroom, and they're working side by side with that kid. And we've seen some positive results from that already. So we did it in 5th grade last year, and now we're doing it in 1st grade and kindergarten. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think we're doing it in 4th grade this year as well.
Yeah.
So that's something we've seen some initial evidence on that's effective for kids, and we're going to continue to push that more. The other thing is race, ethnicity. We don't have a large, diverse population, but I just still wanted to see how do our kids who are non-white, how are they faring in our schools, and they are doing very well. So this does not give us real specific data, though, in terms of specific skills. Last year we focused on fluency from our STAR assessments. This year we're looking at nonfiction reading and writing. So Rachel and Kimberly were able to tease that out from the STAR data. So we're trying to bring in more nonfiction text into the classrooms, just give them more chances to work with that.
All right. Shifting over to middle school.
Yep. I just did the proficient comparisons for our middle school compared to the state average. And as you can see, that's for English language arts, where we have our proficiency on the left and then compared to the state average. An example of the difference in, let's say, advanced, the highest percentage. As a middle school, we were 21.6%, and the statewide average was 10.4% in ELA. And when I compared our forward results to last year's, and as you know, as a middle school, we significantly exceeded expectations, our scores were better than they were last year in 15-16. Our 16-17 scores were actually better. Now, like Luke said, that doesn't necessarily take all the comparisons in when we're looking at these, so there's other factors that will go into the report card score, but we were really happy to see that we had higher percentage scores this year.
So can we track specific grades?
Yes, yes, we can track specific grades all.
You'd have to look.
Well, it's just our second year of the forward.
Right.
Second.
Okay.
Second Badger. Remember Badger was the first year.
Yeah, you're right.
You can go back and get Badger for 1 year, and then this is the second year forward.
Does it help to do that?
You can look at trends over time.
Oh, yes, I like to go back, like for instance, I like to go back and see where our 5th graders would have, our current 7th graders, where they tested in 5th grade and then how they did in 6th grade. So you can do a lot of different comparisons with the
So
results.
that's being done through.
Oh, yeah, oh, yes, yeah. And we got some competitiveness going on here in the middle school between our like 6th grade teachers and our 7th and 8th grade staff, so it's, yeah, for sure.
Did you have a question on this?
I was just checking last year's 5th grade.
Oh, yeah.
To see
Oh, sure.
comparison to the overall middle school scores.
Yeah, mine's a little more, this detail you'd have to look at. You'd have to combine the blue and the purple.
So if you took ELA 15, 16 would be 5th graders last year.
Yep,
51 and 5 would be, or no, that's not, so I don't
It's
know.
like
what that would-
4%.
So call it 55%. And then fast forward to ELA, right here, right? ELA,
If they want to.
all students, proficient and advanced would be 68.
Yeah, I didn't break it down for grade level on this, I just did total middle school, but, I mean, I can get the results for anybody that would want them.
It's available, we'll allude to it later, but also you can, Wise-Public is a website that DPI hosts that you can just drop down menus to 5th grade, proficient and advanced and ELA.
And then-
Yeah,
It's
pretty
really
pleasant.
crazy. What,
Go ahead.
what were the not proficient in 5th grade in the year before? That we got 31%.
45% was not proficient,
Yep. And then you have.
and now it's 31%.
But that's the entire middle school, not just 5th,
Right,
not just the
right, right.
6th grade class.
Correct, yeah.
So it's not,
Thank you. Yeah, right.
I mean, that might be something just to align on, like if we're gonna see comparison versus the state or over, like, you know, I mean, since you
Right.
have that, just so we can see sort of apples and apples, I think that would be a good, next time, just so it's,
Following a cohort.
yeah.
You
So you
can,
can see
I
that.
mean, we can do that already with STAR.
Mhm.
And I would say STAR is a more accurate assessment. So if you want to see longitudinal data for 6 years, you can already do that. It would be more useful, I think. But I know this is what the public sees.
And then math, the 74.5% are total middle school students compared to 43.5 is the statewide average.
So
We saw a huge jump in our math, in our middle school scores from last year to this year.
So when we compare statewide, can we get specifics on rural schools and class size? Or class,
You'll-
or
well-
school size?
You'll see some more slides coming up here that will kind of like school districts and stuff. Yeah. And then science, we were at 74.5 and statewide was 50%. And then social studies, 68 to about 51%.
This is a stacked bar graph which has ELA, math, science, and social studies put on top of each other. And because it's 3rd through 8th, this puts the elementary and middle school together on proficiency rates of proficiency and advanced. So looking at all kids that took the forward exam, and we looked at the contiguous districts around Mineral Point and those that are in Iowa County as one comparable. We can run multiple scenarios, and we've done some data with our conference with all of Iowa County and the contiguous, and then we also did Dane County just to kind of take us outside of the southwestern part of the state. And in all areas we're performing very well. And so this just gives you one snapshot. If you want to see specific comparables to specific schools, let us know. We can run those comparisons, or again, they're available publicly. You can run those, it's called a side-by-side comparison in WiseDash. And we can maybe even take you out there to the link. You can see how to drop those down, but you could do a Mineral Point Platteville comparison, for example, if that was something you're interested in. But as you can see on the stacked bar graph, if you can just look at ELA in blue and just kind of go across the board, we're 66% proficient on the forward 3 through 8 compared to other districts in the area. The math in red, the science in yellow, and the social studies in green. We would be leading, I believe, in each one of those categories. So that's a pretty amazing piece. And again, that was part of our goal about almost 5 years ago now, was to lead CISA 3 as part of our own strategic plan in academic performance. And we've made some great gains there to the point where now we're shifting our focus to other areas, and we'll be bringing back some of that strategic planning going forward in the near future. So we're going to switch over to high school, which is the ACT Aspire. That again looks at readiness factors, and these would be students that are ready or exceeds expectations on the ACT Aspire, which is again all 9th and 10th graders in the form of just English right now. And what we have is again Mineral Point compared to the state average, and we exceed the state in both of those areas. We also have a comparable of students with disabilities. We do not have any students that scored proficient and advanced compared to 15% of the students statewide. So that would be an area where we look at that, but we have very few students, relatively speaking, in a class. So it is possible that you know, if there's 1 or 2 or 3 students, I think there might be 5 in grade 10. That's an area where we would certainly spend some time focusing on our IEP goals and making sure they're making some proficiency gains. This is the math. In math, we did not exceed the state in 10th grade, but did exceed the state in 9th grade. So it's, again, data that we can drill down in, and the math team is actually having a data wall discussion on Wednesday during our professional learning time, in our PLC time, where we are going to bring basically all of our minds that look at data regularly into this boardroom and try to dig down specifically what skills and which students by skill would need supports. For instance, which kids are not doing well in linear algebra, and which kids are not doing good on area of triangles, and then we can actually put some interventions in place to remediate those students and get them the skills that they'll need, not just for 9th or 10th grade, but to do success in Algebra 2 and beyond.
So what I'm seeing is a significant drop in 10th grade?
You'd have to look at, I don't have last year's 9th grade, so I couldn't tell you without pulling the data in. They may have been at 25% and rose to 29%.
Okay.
Or they could have been at 30 and dropped to 29. That I didn't do that comparison for you. So you're just looking at, right now, comparing last year's spring results to the state average.
Okay.
And what is, and I apologize, this is ready to take the ACT exam?
This is
What is
an
exceed
indicator
or
of
ready
being
to
ready.
learn?
Yeah, this would be an indicator. There's 2 scores that come out. This would be a readiness factor or a readiness benchmark, which would tell you how many students are proficient or showing proficiency to be college or career ready. The other is a composite score, which I didn't share, which would be an indicator for how well you would, how well of a predictor you would be to be successful on the ACT.
So this is a post-secondary readiness?
Correct, post-secondary readiness for 9th and 10th grade.
All students have to take this, correct?
Correct, yeah. There is an opt-out option. I don't believe we had many opt-outs last year, with 1 or 2 at most. So this was reading, I'm sorry. Reading again, this is flipped. The 10th graders are exceeding the state average, but the 9th graders are slightly below in the state average for readiness factors as of last spring. So again, this is last year's 9th graders and this year's 10th graders. This is science, and in both cases, we are slightly below the state average in 9th and 10th grade for Aspire readiness. And in writing, we have really moved the needle in this area where we used to underperform the state in writing. Now we're exceeding the state in both 9th and 10th grade. Social studies only gets tested again by the forward exam. We didn't bring it into that 3 through 8 discussion because it's just kind of that oddball. Only 10th graders take social studies and they use the forward to do so, exceeding the state average right now with 54% proficiency in social studies, grade 10. This is the ACT next. Again, there's 5 components of the ACT: English, reading, writing, math, and science. And look at those scores. ELA has a combination of English, language arts, reading, and writing. Those 3 make up the overall composite score for ELA. So again, looking at the state, we've got ACT again as all 11th graders, or all juniors across the board. So we've got them all in one chart. And in proficiency, exceeding the state in English, reading, writing, math, sciences, in the composite score of a 21.4. and the state average on the ACT last year was 20.2. This would be students with disabilities. So again, the same chart reproduced, but now we're taking in a population that is a population we continue to monitor and work with. Again, exceeding the state average in every area except for mathematics, just a half of a percentage point underneath the state average. But I think we're still continuing to monitoring that population, and we try to make gains to close those gaps and make sure that they're as proficient and ready as our regular ed students. So moving forward, we will again take the Forward exam, the ACT Aspire Suite, and the DLM in spring of 18. Same subjects will be covered. We look for trends, which kind of gets back to Kelly's point, what's happening over time with some of these areas across grade levels from one cohort group to the next, or what's happening consistently in 7th grade, for example. Both of those are pieces that we tease out. We look at subgroups that we look at economically disadvantaged. We look at students with disabilities, and we do take in race and ethnicity, but that is not a population that we typically publicize because there's so few students that those demographics might identify them. We also look at trends across content area, what's happening in language arts, or specifically I allude to what's happening in writing over time. Are we making some gains and showing more proficient writers over a long period of time? So next steps would be to actually deliver those assessments in next spring. You've got this data. It's not as timely as I think educators would like to inform their practice. It comes in so late that it's hard to use that in a meaningful way. Again, we use the STAR assessment as a better predictor for what happens quickly to make some gains. If you want to explore WISE Dash, I believe that link is live. It'll take you out. This is on the DPI website under student performance, and this is a place where you can pull down the WSAS tab to all the different exams that we take. The Forward allows you to do a side-by-side comparison, for example, and clicking on that allows you to then pull down a drop-down menu. Again, what school, this is ELA, and that's where math and science is found. What test, this was the Forward or the DLM. You can group students by some type of a subcategory, which is economic status, or you can group them by disabilities or so forth. And then as you get into that data, dropping down mineral point on one side and another school district on the other, or state average is the default. So all that's available for you to investigate. When we get more information about the report card, we'll certainly share that. Again, tentatively released in a secure site with embargoed data mid to late October. Can I answer any questions for anything?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So, the results of this is, I guess my question is, so we're teaching to a test, or we're using the data of the test. My concern is how a curriculum is built around those tests.
Those are pieces that we're having conversations. Yep, we're having multiple conversations around that. And that's part of what a professional learning community time is used for, is to determine what are essential outcomes, or you'll hear teachers use the word boulders from our training with Maria Nielsen in the fall of this year. Those are the things we're going to get really critical to make sure that kids know. And then the question is, was that assessed on the state assessment or not? And if it wasn't, should it be? Is a key question, and there should be agreement within that team that, yes, so this is something we should assess. The state thinks it's important, we think it's important. There's other things that we might find on a state assessment that we didn't consider a boulder or something that was essential for kids to learn. And the question is, why didn't we consider that as something that's essential in all the curriculum that we teach? And should we add it to the curriculum or not? Or if it is in the curriculum, should we make it more of an emphasis and really make sure that it's tight and that all kids have that? Or is it just a nice to know or need to know instead of a have to know? And those are the conversations that are constantly happening in that Wednesday time to align outcomes to some extent with the examinations where it makes sense. And where it makes sense, for instance, Matt, I think alluded to, all of our kids from grades 3 through 5 seem to struggle with nonfiction text and the scriptures or making and connecting meaning to nonfiction. So that was something that became evident that we wanted to shift our focus on so that we make sure that we're hitting targets that maybe were being missed.
So, for example, would be biography. My concern for that would be that it's all races. You know, that we're not, you know what I mean? So it can be
Yep.
multicultural,
Yep, that's, we just,
which can be, you know, a good word or a bad word for some.
we talked about at the last PLC meeting, in fact.
Okay.
Because we're talking right now about classroom libraries and how to enhance them. And one thing I mentioned directly was, are all the races in your classroom represented in the text so that they can see themselves? And so we're now looking in the order books to make sure that that's happening. So we did we did like a peer audit in our classroom libraries to see how that was working.
And even based on sex, female, male. You know, role models for, you know, both genders.
Yep. Yeah, that's something we're always open to feedback.
I guess it's, you know, it's nice to know what the content is.
I think your description of how you use the test to analyze the curriculum is, makes a lot of sense and sounds good.
Yeah, well, I think I would characterize it, we stopped short of teaching to the test, but we would be remiss not to keep the test in mind as we figure out what it is that we should be teaching in classrooms.
I would say to the test itself, I mean, they're not asking kids to just put A, B, or C. They're actually asking them to respond in writing and more higher level thinking. So when we talk about, we say give these kids the opportunities to think, you know, write analysis on, you know, two pieces of text, which they would do in real life, so.
And they actually, before we have the test window, the DPI actually encourages you by sending you sample test questions to use with your students, before the test window opens. So they can kind of get an idea of what a question is going to be like, because otherwise kids would be like.
That's another thing that we incorporate into our classrooms is the question type. So that we don't see that type of question as maybe more open-ended or needs a constructed response to it, should be part of what's being infused in our classrooms. We're not just using questions that just recall memory, but actually know to think with a deeper level of knowledge, because that's what's being asked on our assessments as well. What you'll see in the budget report next week, or the 2 weeks from now on the 23rd, is then a crosswalk between how are we doing academically as it combines or compares to how are we spending per pupil. And looking at longitudinally, because I think that also then brings us back into, and then specifically where are we spending our money and how is that strategically moving or not moving our students forward. So that'll be part of our budget discussion in a couple weeks. Anything else on data or test assessments?
Thank you.
You're welcome. The enrollment report for this year is in front of you, and if you're looking at your packet, it's page 51. And I just wanted to reaffirm our numbers this year and give you a quick comparison to last year. As we look across the bottom here, there are 724 students that are in our enrollment or in our classrooms. And out of those, there are 85 students that we have to take out of that 724 because they are not residents of our district. They don't reside here, so we can't count them for purposes of state aid. We also have to reduce the 6 students that are part-time. We factor that in later, but they are not full-time students, so we can't count them as 6 bodies again in our student count here of 724. So we take away the 85 that are open enrolling in that are not our students, the 6 that are partial enrollment, but then we need to add in those students that are ours but are not attending here. There are 43 students that reside in Mineral Point that are moving out into other school districts through open enrollment. So that gives us a final number of 676 students that are right now accounted for in the district. From just an open enrollment perspective, 85 students is up from the number of open enrolling in from, 60? I'm recalling from memory, do you remember? thought it was,
I believe it is 60,
I
yes.
think it's up. And then the 43 is down from 45 that are open and rolling out, so we have 2 less students open and rolling out. Nonetheless, that 676 needs to be converted to FTE because they count, they got kindergarten kids, 5/10, and a EC pre-K child is 6/10. No, I'm sorry,
Backwards, the
backwards,
other way.
5/10 for pre-K, 6/10 for kindergarten. So 661 FTE is the number that we reported to DPI. That is down from the 682 number last year, or that's down 21 students, roughly state aid. Revenue coming in at $10,000 per student. That translates to $210,000 in lost revenue, offering the same things as we did last year, just with 21 less kids in the building. That is offset somewhat by open enrollment back in, so that's not an entire cost that we need to bear, but it is a significant part of our budget shortfall, is our declining enrollment over time. Any questions on enrollment?
Which one is used for divisional placement?
They actually use the 661, the very last number,
For which one, what's that now?
for divisional placement, but they use prior year's number.
Right, but they use the FTE.
Right, so they will be using this year's 682 from last year.
Are you talking just high school?
High school.
Oh, I'm
Just
sorry.
high school, so there's no
Yeah.
FTE
Okay.
Yeah,
to consider.
So just to clarify, you said kindergarten was the 0.6, and it's not, it's EC and 4K.
3-year-olds 0.5, 4-year-olds 0.6.
Okay, so kindergarten is a full FTE.
Kindergarten is a full FTE.
Got it.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Yes.
Next is the budget update. This is the budget document that Marcia and I have been working on. And this is what will be published in the paper for the next 2 weeks. We have to have a 2-week posting prior to adopting a budget. And this budget rolled up has all of the information that the state gave us that we are aware of to date. There's still more pieces that are coming in, which is property values and then certifying the levy. The property valuation we'll talk about in a little bit, but it's anticipated in mid-October by the 15th. So what you see here is a budget beginning fund balance and an ending fund balance. And the difference between those two is a drop because it's reflecting the shortfall that is going to be absorbed in this year's budget. And then keeping in mind that that's only a budget and it's a biannual budget by the state, but we tend to budget annually by the school district. So at the end of next year, what I pledged to you is that that would be a balanced budget, minimally back up to the $2,012,000 in fund balance would be restored fully by the end of the second biannual budget, or the second year of the biannual budget. So we may run a shortfall this year, but we will have fully replenished that, and I hope, and then some, by the end of next fiscal year. And that's a function of one of the latest adopted budgets in recent history. So if we go down, I think some of the bigger line items at the bottom, total expenditures and other financing, last year unaudited, and that audit is in the process of being finished by Johnson Block. Johnson Block, $9,758,000. This year's expenditure total, $9,831,000.
Does this include the sparsity aid?
This does have all of the state sources in it, yes. Yeah. So there are some things that you'll see in this is the transfer of service revenues, the sparsity aid, the hold harmless exemption for declining enrollment. There were some other, they were supposed to fully fund and actually increase sparsity aid, but that was a late removal, so we were hoping for that. That was one that I don't think we had foreseen coming. The low limit revenue exemption, it was something that was not going to impact us, so whether that was in or out didn't make a difference for us. The special project fund, this is money that's budgeted and accounted for in our special projects. That's Fund 21. Let's see, I gotta check with Marcia on that one. Not that the numbers aren't right, I just want to make sure I know what's tying into the special projects fund. The debt service fund is where we keep the lease payments, so that would be where the stadium lease is kept and where the lease for the apples are kept is under the debt service fund. The capital project funds, last year, we were carrying expenditures of roughly about 16,000. We don't have anything budgeted in capital. We moved it from a capital projects fund into just a general maintenance fund for Rogers. So we do have money in the budget for the dust collector and for the roof investigation, but that's just coming underneath the general operational budget of Fund 10, not specifically in our capital projects fund. The food service, request tonight to have that on our next agenda. We can go through the difference in those two budgets, but there is a decrease in actual expenditures and revenues from last year to this year, finding some efficiencies and a little more revenue coming in as the student counts have been up as of late. Community Service Fund represents Fund 80, and that particularly has gone from 80 to 95. That represents the increase in the board-approved musical program positions of roughly $5,000 and then the FAST program of $15,000. We have not used the cooperative program fund. All funds, when looking at your net expenditures, from $11,134,000 to $11,247,000 represents roughly a 1% increase in our expenditures over last year's amount. So again, I'm trying to stay fiscally responsible. There's some areas that have moved and shifted a little bit, but mostly expenditures have stayed relatively flat given the times that we're in. Likewise, the total levy, what does that mean? This is something that's hard to really gauge yet because we don't know our property values, but roughly a 2% increase in our levy is what we're anticipating right now. We will know more in October, roughly the 15th. Specifically, the 15th is when they have to give us data around our property valuation. If we're kind of holding a flat 0%, and if we get an increase of property value up through, let's just say 2.5% increase in property values, our mill rate will actually decrease this year. If it stays flat or it's not as generous as we hope it would be, there could be a slight uptick in our mill rate, but I would anticipate it's going to stay relatively flat. There's not going to be a big spike of 50 cents one way or the other. It's going to stay pretty neutral for the most part. Discontinued programs at the elementary, we stopped using Accelerated Reader or MobiMax. We just weren't maximizing those programs. We stopped using Global PD, which is part of our PLC process, and we found that just using Google Sites was a much more cost-effective platform for capturing our data and sharing our work with one another. And we stopped with the Chromebook replacement schedule, moving over into the MacBook lease. So you'll see that under the new programs. We did add the FAST program, Families and Schools Together. Our staff has been trained and we're currently soliciting families to start our program in October. The Apple lease, this is the first payment of a 4-year lease program. Math intervention and options support, that is the staffing to bring in math interventions for the first time in our district. And then the additional supports for Amanda being the only person prior to this now has a second person in the morning supporting our options kids. And then finally, we talked about the choral program and the musical support staffing. That $5,000 helps with those that are in roles that specifically support the musical, and they have now been added to the budget. Can I back up and clarify? The only other thing I would share before I leave this is that the board should have received the line item budget about a week ago. If you wanted to review that in any depth or ask any questions, let me know. If you didn't receive it, I'll reshare it. But it basically was a line by line of each.
I think I received it. Did you send it electronically or?
Yeah, it was electronically.
To Google Doc.
It was in Doc?
Yeah, I believe it was a Google spreadsheet. Then I can send it as an Excel if you prefer it in Excel format.
I'll just see if I have it.
And I send it that way because typically the board wants to do some sorting and just investigating of certain buildings and or areas of interest. So that is available for your review. Our next meeting then would be October 23rd, and at that time we would review this document again and answer any questions that you might have, certify the levy because we'll know property values at that time, so that we can calculate mill rates and have all that information for you. Plus I'll give a small presentation on some of our academic performance as it relates to our per pupil spending and how those two are linked together. capital improvement updates. Just briefly, there are two that I wanted to touch on. The security entrance, I think that Kevin completely addressed that. The RFPs will be due back to me. I'm sorry, the quotes will be due back to me, but the request for proposals will be due back to me in 10 days. And I will be the one that will retrieve them and hold them and secure them. We will certainly open them together if the board would have an interest in making sure there's fidelity in the process. I can give you the date and time that we plan to look at those for the first time. And then the other is an update on the dust collector system. The scheduled installation is for the 17th of October. They'll be coming in and starting to do some of the implementation of the collection system. I don't have a timeline on how long it will take to install, but it is scheduled to commence on the 17th. Okay, to go to the next item?
Yep.
Climate control. This is just for information for the board. There were some high temperatures and some humidity levels that were recorded recently in some of our hotter days. And there was some discussions and communications that I had shared with the board, if I received it by email. There was only one other phone call that I received, in addition to the emails received by the board from me, that was a teacher that I would characterize in distress about what to do with a student that was hot and sent to the nurse's office and then sent back again because they were just heated and overheated, but there was a discussion about whether they should or shouldn't remain in the classroom. Beyond that, it would be helpful to get some board direction on how to handle similar days like this in the future. And I scouted around and looked for some information from other schools about how to handle excessive heat days. It's hard to do comparables in closed school, but that was one of the requests we had, is that it's in excess and we should just close school. Specifically on the second day. After the first day, people were just tired, and the second day was kind of more of the same. And I think one day it might have been able to be handled, but two seemed to be excessive. And
Did Lancaster close at one point, didn't they?
I'm not aware of that. It's
Yes,
possible.
they did close.
Early release.
Yeah,
Early
they closed
release,
one
was
day.
it?
So that was my point, is that it's hard to get comparables or to have conversations with other superintendents whether they're going to close or not, because some of their buildings are air conditioned and some are not. So I'd have to find those groups of buildings that are not and see what they're doing. But even if we do, there will be some, like a cold weather day, that will say it wasn't hot enough, I don't know why you're sending the kids home and I have to leave work early. And there'll be others that will say, I can't believe you didn't call it sooner, you knew it was going to be this hot the day before, why didn't you cancel it and even send them for half a day? So it'd be helpful to have some language from the board that would say, at this threshold, this is when we cancel. Or if not, we just need to kind of work within that confinement of we make the call as it ebbs and flows, but again, it's nice to say this is our policy or our procedure. And if it's not a board policy, nothing has to be done, we can kind of take it as we go. And the other thing we could do is look at long-term facility planning to include climate control in buildings would be another option. So I just opened it up for the board to have a discussion. If you heard from your constituencies about what they would like to see going forward, or if you have other ideas, I'm very interested.
I'm interested in looking long-term climate control. I mean, I think it would be appropriate. And in the meantime, I think a policy, if you feel that you need a policy, I mean, I believe you've got the authority to close the school without a policy in place. So if you think there's going to be no learning in the classrooms, then I think you should close the school.
I worry about setting precedent though, because if you're at the start of September and what if by some fluke we have a really hot September and you have 3 weeks of 90+ degrees, we're going to call school for 3 weeks in a row.
Well, that's why
I would
my first
hesitate to
comment was, looking at climate control probably makes sense. I think,
I know, we're not starting August 20th like we used to, and we were lucky this year too not to have a hot year. Because we did not have a hot summer. My only concern is if we set it 90 degrees, for example, and next year we have a hot September, we could be out of school for 3 weeks, and that wouldn't be good either.
Well, Luke will be in a tough spot anyway, because some parents will say,
Yep.
so, you know, it's not a win-win. I like that the children can stay home and not be penalized, because, you know, some kids are affected differently. I could have never stood that as a child, that's just something I can't tolerate, so, you know, their parents know their children, and they shouldn't be punished for that. I think, Luke, that's your call.
Yeah, you closed school last year one day because of fog. I don't think we have a fog policy. You know, I think you have that authority.
I agree. A couple ideas. One is that it's just optional. You know, if you feel like your kid is in danger, then you can just keep them home, which isn't a formal school position to close. The other is a little bit more directive in that if it hits a certain threshold, we just will close. And then my question is that threshold appropriate? You know, even if you're leaving it to my internal call, is 90 degrees the appropriate threshold? You know, will the board support that as hot enough? Keeping in mind that's outdoor air temperature, not indoor actual temperature. So we found in some of our recent studies that Matt was doing as he's walking around the building is that air temperature would be in the mid 80s, but already approaching 90, low 90s by 11 a.m. on one side of the building, not necessarily on the other side of the building. So it all is somewhat relative as well, and that's what makes it tough. Is it's only 88 degrees today is a high, but the room temperatures are mid 90s. You know, is that worthy of an early release or a cancellation?
It's a good question. I mean,
It is, but.
I think-
I think Luke's the only one that can judge it. And like you said, he's gonna catch heck either way.
So I'd rather catch heck with the board on my back than with the board saying, we're mixed. Some say you should, some say you shouldn't. It just
Well,
helps me.
you just kind of said that the problem is that on the south side of the school, those classrooms are going to be warmer. And I guess if it's going to be a hotter day, you need to try to move those kids someplace else. Have the teacher take them outside if it's nicer outside, or library or whatever.
Right. Yeah, maybe have some, field trips that can be executed on those days if you, can foresee them coming.
I assume in the winter you have the opposite problem on the side that doesn't have the sun. Those rooms are probably colder.
Mhm.
So then where do you judge when you're going
Yeah,
to
but
run
they're
them
not
out?
like
Because
below
they're-
50.
Could be.
You have one or two rooms colder this year, Charlie.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah, first grade area.
Is there?
Where are the sensors at? I had some concern with the difference in room thermometers and monitored sensors being 6 to 7 degrees in multiple classrooms reported. Where are the sensors at in comparison to, are they just not trustworthy thermometers, or the sensors? I guess what caused that? 'Cause
Yeah.
96 concerned me a lot more than 88.
My understanding is the sensors are located on the thermostat, and in most cases, those are located next to the door. So sometimes what you're catching is when the doors are open, the hallway air is coming in and giving you some relief, but the classroom air is much warmer, especially next to windows and so forth, so you're not getting a true read on the temperature. The other part that is problematic is that the air doesn't come into each room differently based on its need. It runs down a series of ducts that have dampers on it, or basically regulate the amount of air that goes further down the line. So from me to Kelly is going to be a very different experience, even though your thermostat's calling for more, this thermostat's calling for stop. And so it's got to find a way to mitigate those two between more and stop, or vice versa. And so that's part of the full automation of controls, is then to allow each room to call for more or less based on its need.
How did the teachers feel about it? Was it, I mean, they're the one who had to manage the children.
Yeah.
So how do they feel about it, or how did? I mean, most of them sounded like they were pretty positive. I know the one issue with the, the overheated child and, which is scary if you're not, not familiar with that or.
Yeah, I think teachers try to remain positive in very challenging situations, but I think it comes down to not a lot of learning was taking place. There was a lot of managing of the classrooms. We gave them a lot of flexibility and latitude to just take care of themselves and take care of the children. So there was naps that were taking place, trying to find cool spaces, and it just wasn't effective for learning.
But it was effective for children adapting to different situations, which a lot of children have concerns about. I mean, adaptability is a big thing for anyone.
Yeah.
So I guess on a positive note, they learned how to adapt.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I took a lot of positives from the staff that responded to my inquiries. But I do give them credit for really working through a challenging situation. And if our recent history is shared, there's going to be more days like this, for sure. In the springs and the falls, in the summer school, for sure. We've canceled summer school almost every year, at least one day, with the exception, I think, last summer. And so we just need to be clear about how we're going to handle that when these situations come, and we have agreement around what that threshold is and what's going to happen when we hit it. And
I think the heat index of 90 degrees is reasonable. And if you feel comfortable with that move, then we need to stand behind you.
others feeling the same threshold or different?
I think Jeff already said he feels differently.
I mean, I think that your point about learning didn't happen. I mean, as the people that are supposed to be honoring the dollars of our taxpayers, if we have scenarios where kids aren't learning, we shouldn't be having school, because the operations on a day-to-day basis are expensive. So, I mean, I support you and the administration determining whether your students and teachers are able to learn and able to, I mean, what's not on there is that teachers, I mean, there could be pregnant teachers that are trying to manage their own, you know, I mean, it's hard to work in those conditions as well as learn. So, I mean, I support, if you guys feel like if it's a heat index of 87, but one side of the school is already at 95 degrees, using good judgment. I mean, what I get worried about is that we put a lot of red tape in place because we aren't disciplined to trust and know that we are empowered to use good judgment. So you and Matt and, you know, Mitch and Vicki have my, you know,
Well,
yeah, I mean, I support that you guys know what's best for your staff and your students.
And because that happened, I think you will make good decisions. If we wouldn't have had 2 or 3 days like that, then, you know, now the experience is there, then you can make a good decision.
Okay.
Well, and I think we as a board and community have to know that sometimes we're gonna call it and it's gonna not be as hot as we thought. And then other times we're not, and it's going to be hotter, and those days will even out. It's like every other thing where you are just doing your best to make a judgment call. And as long as we can sort of stay, you know, mindful of that, and when people do call and say, why did you cancel, just, you know, that these are gray areas, and we're doing they're doing the best they can to make sure that the staff and students are taken care of.
Is it more of a problem at the elementary?
I would characterize it as yes, but Vicki, you're still here. How challenging is it in this building? I know it's warm, but I know you don't get a chance to do a compare and contrast.
It's the same, certain sides of the building can be really warm. I always worry about when it gets that hot and humid, the floors. They sweat, they get wet. You know, and if you've ever been around new sixth graders to a building, you know, you're constantly telling them, slow down, and, so that's what I worry about. I mean, areas of this building seemed very, very warm. I mean, it was almost like a couple of times where outside seemed more comfortable than in a classroom.
That sweating floor thing has always been an issue at the elementary school. I mean, I'm surprised actually
And
more
it was
people have
happening-
not been heard on hot.
She's talking about middle
It-
school.
But it
I know,
was,
but I
it was
mean-
happening up here too.
So that, I mean,
Yeah.
that's something we haven't, that doesn't even take into account here.
Yeah.
That's a danger, a safety issue.
Well, and likewise,
Or
the bus ride
downstairs.
homes were pretty
And
warm.
the busing,
Yeah.
yeah, no air conditioning on buses, yeah.
Well, we're talking about buses, do any of our buses have seatbelts?
No.
Not yet.
No.
The new ones do, don't they?
Then I
No,
don't
no,
know for
ours
sure.
don't, but
And I know they're always optional, even ours were optional.
They are.
Okay, that gives me some direction, thank you.
Do you feel comfortable with this work?
I do. You know, what I'm taking from this is that there's some discretion by the administrative team to come together and make some decisions. I think if we're hovering right around 90, I see us as leaving it as an option for parents to keep their kids at home.
And a wet 90 is, or humid 90 is different than a dry 90.
Correct, and I think that's the part you need to look at. There's charts that allows us to look at heat and humidity and come up with an index score. They use it for when it's not okay to practice outside, for example. It can give us some indicators of what might be happening inside. And if it's going to get in excess of 90, I think then we look at, instead of just making it optional, that we would look at a cancellation situation. There seems to be some support for continuing to look at climate control over time as maybe a longer term solution. To characterize that okay? Can you summarize it?
Sounded good.
Okay. This elementary school space evaluation, this is just for information only, there's no action associated with it. It was a survey of elementary staff that could share their greatest concerns around the elementary building space. The black and white copy of the board book packet didn't come out very clear, so I think if I were to just take some large takeaways from there, we've got some spaces that are adequately spaced. This survey would suggest that the playground has plenty of ample room to it. Their special education areas aren't as maybe of a concern as I portrayed it to be. I still feel that there's some challenging spaces for kids with needs, but it didn't come out in the staff survey as prominent as I had portrayed it. The regular classrooms and so forth are of concern, workroom spaces. I won't go through each one of these areas. Hopefully you've had a chance to look at that. I think some of the other pieces that I might spend some time around is, before I let you talk, is just what are some of the options for dealing with this. And it picks up with the idea of portables. Portables did not seem to rise to the level of a solution by staff. Again, this is just elementary staff support and regular. Nobody else was surveyed, so we didn't get parent input on this or others. But portable solutions or portable classrooms were not deemed a very high solution. Relocating the 5th grade to the middle school did receive some support.
It's higher than I thought it would be.
Yeah, a little bit more than half could agree or strongly agree with relocating the 5th grade. Overwhelmingly adding more classrooms to the elementary, close to 75%. A little bit more than 75% actually were in favor of supporting and expanding the classroom. Looking at a brand new building with a K-5 school certainly had a lot of support, 75%, but obviously there's a price tag that goes with that.
Was there no neutral option on that?
It just force ranks to either agree on one side or another, so it doesn't allow you to opt out and say into Switzerland. You know, it might, you know, the question is how might it change if we added a neutral? I don't know.
I like the commitment. You want their opinion.
Leasing in the community, that was probably one of the least agreeable options to, you know, look at leasing a building for your pre-K or kindergarten or other. Seemed to be support for a wide, 90% of the staff would like to see more flexible learning spaces with movable furniture and collaboration areas and so forth. And there seems to be some strong sentiment around that we need to address those needs sooner rather than later. The greatest needs, regular education classrooms.
So would ELL be considered regular education or, I mean, ELL was in a closet last year, right?
Yeah, ELL would not be considered a regular ed classroom, it would be considered a special education classroom.
But it's not in a closet.
It is currently not in a closet, correct?
I find it interesting, sorry, on this one that you only had one that was worried about the secure front entrance and two for the gym. Those two amaze me.
Yeah. What did come out was space for community rose up pretty high. And I think this might be a reflection, I'm just interpreting, but when parents and grandparents come in for Grandparents' Day or Veterans Assemblies or so forth, the parking and the seating and so forth for that community space isn't adequate for those types of assemblies. And staff have always been challenged to use the lunchroom as also the classroom for physical education and also the assembly area for morning meetings, and it just is a space that...
So actually that with the gym and lunchroom should have been added together.
I think you could put those two
Yeah,
together.
I think so too.
Because I was
Otherwise,
shocked that there wasn't some, the gym and
yeah,
lunchroom wasn't a lot.
because community wouldn't be used every day.
Yeah.
So what was what, you had two, there's secure entrance, secure front entrance. So the secured entrances are all of them? Like, I'm not sure, or is that the same thing, it's just worded differently, so it's...
I need to see what the ... was. I can pull up the actual survey. I don't know if that... Let's see. Yeah, I'll pull up the actual survey.
Are the entrances numbered now?
They are not yet, but they will be.
How soon?
Soon. It's a work in progress. You know, right now our attention and priority was getting on the secure entrance, so that's where our focus has been. Do you want me to take the time to go up the phone?
No.
Thank you. Okay.
It's two people, I was just saying,
Yep.
it does nothing.
I'll look it up though and I'll send it to you. I don't know exactly what that
Would it be appropriate for the school board to get a tour of the elementary school while it's in session?
Yeah, absolutely. And I was thinking about that because that was one of the requests you had. Typically, when we try to schedule a tour at a certain date and a certain time, there isn't a critical mass that can make it all at the same time because of work commitments. We are always willing and able to give a tour, so I would just set it up directly with Matt on any day that works for you. And if you wanted to, I assume you're talking the elementary, but it could be both buildings. Just set that up. If you want me to give you a list of dates to come through, but I think it's also nice to come in and be able to stay in certain areas as long as you want to move through. So you're always welcome as a guest, and you know.
But not a surprise guest.
We prefer not surprises because you don't know what else is going on in that particular day, and we don't want you to get caught in the middle of a fire alarm or so forth. But you know, we're very open to accommodating board members' visits.
So is the options in education, are they in there now?
Yes, thank you. They are in their space. They've been in there since last week, and that would be another place that would be good for a tour. It's a beautiful facility, and after the meeting, I can share a couple of pictures that were taken. It's really a place to be proud of. It's really.
I sent some before pictures that you could compare.
Yeah. Then we get into board policy. I believe we're at that part of the agenda. There's the 180 series. If anybody has looked and wants to pull some of these into a committee, let me know. Otherwise, I will clean them up and bring them back for a final review at our next board meeting. Anybody wants to pull specifically or talk further about?
Well, we were talking about something today. What were you gonna?
It's in the final, the 170 series, so we'll get to that when we get to the action item.
Okay.
Thanks, Vicki.
I'm fine with these moving on to the next board meeting.
I have a question on one of them, and I'm not sure which. It was about changing your vote. Which one was that under?
183.
Right here.
Right?
So we're not changing it, so, not that I would change my vote again, but that's still allowed, is that correct?
You can,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Before it's published.
that is more under parliamentary procedure on how to change a vote. So, yeah, that was permitted before, it would still be permitted now, there's no
Okay.
policy in place that would prohibit that. If there is no 180s that need further pulling or review, I will clean those up and bring those back for a final form. And again, you can look at them over this next month. The 170s are here for action. These were discussed and some were specifically tabled in the 165s for additional review. That was the school board conflict. Kelly, you had inquired about 171.2, the agenda preparation policy. And so hopefully you got a chance to get further review and thought. There's no additional revisions that have been made from last meeting to this meeting. It was just tabled for final action.
I move that we approve 171, 171.1.
Yeah, this was the one that I had a question, that we didn't decide on last time, right? Was
What we
that the
didn't
one?
decide on last time was school board member conflicts of interest.
Okay.
Your motion was to...
My motion was to approve 1, 2, 3, 4, these 5 policies and the rule. Is there a second?
I'll second.
171,
171, 71.1.2, 173, and 165. Any discussion? All right.
So I just wanted to when it comes to the conflict of interest one, like that we talked about today, as long as you're not getting a financial benefit from something that you might be loosely connected to or connected to, you are able to vote if you feel like you're okay, as long as people know that, like the Southwest Health example.
well, and, yeah, and your allegiance is to the school board. Like, would you abstain if,
I think she would have to abstain on that,
okay,
because she works there.
that's what we're discussing.
Yeah.
So like
So
today, I
Jeff
didn't
feels-
abstain because it's to take action on something that is not at all related to my work with Southwest Health. So I voted on,
And it was in the
On
accounts
both
payable.
payable.
Bills payable.
correct.
Okay.
Indirectly, she's getting.
Can't remember the name of the
But I feel like
school.
indirectly, as a small town like this, there's
Well,
gonna be a lot of
but-
conflict, so I
Well,
just,
she's
I wanna
getting paid
clarify.
by
I think
them,
we
but her
wanna
husband
strike
doesn't,
through that.
doesn't have a
That's our
contract with
interpretation.
them.
Yeah.
He's got it
So
right
that,
there.
that comes into play.
Right. I mean, if I was married to Brad Bomstead, I would definitely not vote on his contract. I would have definitely abstained from that. Or if, do you see that, like, right? Or if he was my
Superior.
brother, or, yeah, right, or if he was my boss at Southwest Health, correct.
Not too long ago on the TV at Channel 21,
Of
there
the
was
contract.
schools going through this, and 2 schools let every board member vote on every one. Money-wise, the teacher can be a, husband can be a teacher, they vote, gets vote on every one.
I remember you talking about
Yeah,
that.
I wish I remember what it was about, but they went through all this, what's co-tele, you know.
I don't- I
Is
don't
there any
know if
state
that's a
statutes on that?
statute
No.
That's referred to.
There is, there is certainly ethical pieces to this, but, I would say it would be unethical to introduce your influence on a decision where you directly benefit from. But from a statute perspective, this is more often than not vested in board policy on how you want to conduct business. So number 3 is what Andy was referring to, that says if you're employed by a corporation or business which furnishes goods or services, you shall declare your association and refrain from debating and voting upon the question. So
On
the
the
board
question.
can then decide to include or remove this language.
So, but is it different, like, so the way I look at that is if we're gonna negotiate and decide whether we're going back to use Southwest Health Services versus other services, I would abstain and remove myself from discussion on that. But ultimately, the bills payable then, I wouldn't have to abstain from the entire bills payable, because if the board, outside of me, said, yes, we wanna continue to go with this company that you work for, I wasn't a part of that decision, so I can ultimately still vote on bills payable going forward if that, right?
That would be my interpretation.
That's my understanding of it, as long as I'm declaring that I'm out of the process to decide on that contract.
That makes sense.
That makes sense.
This is the part that's vested in statute that you had referred to as the Board of Ethics. There's a statutory code that says basically what I was saying before is that you can't have any financial gain. Your vote to have a contracted service with Southwest Health does give you no financial gain, whereas Jeff is a different example, may receive financial gain as the owner of a business that might do business with the schools. So I think that's the difference between the two.
Right. So we continue to abstain if Dan's Plumbing is on there, since I am part owner of that.
Correct.
Got it.
So
There's a motion.
and a
I
second.
just want to be clear, consistent. I don't want
And
to-
everybody, you and I is clear.
All right, so, all in favor?
I,
Anybody opposed? Okay.
There is no closed session items scheduled for the agenda. Next meeting dates would be the 23rd, Monday the 23rd, 2 weeks from now, 6:30 for a budget adoption and certifying the levy.
Before we close, can you take a look at this? What is this here piece of paper? It's just a guideline?
This looks to be what was proposed to be board policy around the governance
Like 5 years
model.
ago.
Way back when,
This was not adopted.
it was never passed.
Okay,
Yeah,
because that says the 10 o'clock closing time.
yeah,
Somewhere
that
in
was
there.
proposed but did not.
Wasn't not approved.
Yep. Thank you for the treats.
Yeah, motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion, Frank.
Second. Second.